Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 221, Jan versus Dvalishvili, also known as UFC Vegas 71. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. We're recording this on Sunday night, a little later than we usually do. We're still, we talked barely 24 hours ago, or less than 24 hours ago, right after UFC 285 ended. That was a wild one. I mean, honestly, if I had it my way, I'd spend another 2 hours talking about that card and leave most of this shit for but
I mean, man, my brain has already moved on.
Yeah, time marches on, and so do we. One interesting note about this card, we're calling it UFC Vegas 71, but it is not taking place at the Apex. This one is taking place at the theater at Virgin something, whatever they're calling it now. It is the joint at the Hard Rock. It's, one of the UFC's longtime standbys for a mid-sized venue in Vegas. They moved up from the Pearl at the Palms, which is like a 1,500 or 2,000 seater, to the joint at the Hard Rock that was like a 4,000 seater for things that weren't quite big enough to pack T-Mobile Arena or the Thomas and Mack Center. So while this is a fight night card and it is in Vegas, it is not going to be an empty house. It's going to be a return to those kind of fun, hopefully loud, medium-sized packed houses that, used to be one of their mainstays in that first decade after Tough. So I am excited about that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I don't think it should be in Vegas. I think it should be somewhere else. Why the UFC hasn't gone on the road. And
yes, on the road is better, but at least there's going to be people. Yeah. But no, I agree. Like last year, just that string of shows they had were, obviously, the London ones were home runs, but even just getting on the road to places like Austin and Columbus and stuff, those places were so live. I really do look forward to the return of that. On this one, we've got 14 fights. We lost, of course, the Anthony Smith versus Jamal Hill fight that we were going to get because Jamal Hill got called up on short notice to fight for and win the UFC light heavyweight title. That left Anthony Smith very famously just kind of having his moment of heartbreak at the desk, and everybody handled that incredibly professionally considering what was going on there. But we're still left with some goodies on this card. I mean, we have a fantastic bantamweight main event between former champ Petr Yan and Merab, one of the most overdue title contenders in the UFC at this point. A guy who's on a 8-fight win streak that should probably be at least 9, if not 10. We've got the Battle of the Alexanders in the co-main event, good top 10 heavyweight matchup. Yeah. And then we have the Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann main event from 2 weeks ago that got pushed because Krylov got sick on fight day. So up at the top, this is about as strong a fight night card as you're going to see these days.
I think it's like probably a B+, maybe an A-. I think it's a good card.
I agree. I mean, south of those, there is some weirdness. There are a lot of debuting fighters. There are a lot of, busted or at least dented prospects that are, trying to get back on track, if not save their job. But it's not a card jammed with like minus 600 favorites or anything. The fights themselves are pretty well matched, and I think a lot of them promise action. Any general thoughts about this one before we dive in?
No, it's good. There's a couple other guys on the card that you didn't even mention, like some hot guys like Jonathan Martinez is on this card. Said Nurmagomedov's on this card. Who else?
There are two
Bautista is on this card. This is some hot guys right now.
There are 2 male bantamweights over the age of 40 on this card.
Yeah, that's
wild.
Yeah,
I mean, that is not a weight division that is generally kind to the elderly. And not only are there 2, 40-something bantamweights in this card, but both of them are on win streaks.
Yeah, that's right. And then we have a flyweight who's like 39. So,
yeah. A flyweight that's 39, and also, has been doing pretty well recently. So I want whatever vitamins they're taking because that just sounds exhausting to me. First fight out of the gate, at least as the card is currently structured at UFC Fight Night 221, is a welterweight matchup between Carlston Harris and Abubakar Nurmagomedov. Harris, the 35-year-old Guyana native, is 17-5 overall. He is 2-1 in the UFC. He debuted back in spring of 2021, racked up 2 first-round finishes over Christian Aguilera and Impa Kasanganay before running into Shavkat Rakhmonov last February at UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Strickland. Rakhmonov put him away late in the first round with a spinning hook kick. He's looking to get back on track here, and in his way will be Nurmagomedov. The 33-year-old Dagestani is 17-3-1 overall. He also is 2-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut, got somewhat shockingly choked out by David Zavada after coming into the UFC as a pretty highly touted prospect out of WSOF and PFL. Since then, he has made good on some of that promise with back-to-back decision wins over Jared Gooden and Gaji Omargadzhiev. The most recent of those, the Omargadzhiev fight, was at UFC 280 last October. Odds on this one are fairly close, but Harris is a mild favorite. He's minus 145 or so. Nurmagomedov out there around plus 115. Keith, 2 guys kind of meeting in the middle here. Nurmagomedov came in with a bunch of shine. I mean, he was really, really good in WSOF. He was one of the odds-on favorites to at least make the final in that first season of PFL, and just he had a draw with Bojan Veliskovic in the quarterfinals. Someone had to advance, and Nurmagomedov hurt his hand, so Veliskovic advances. Meanwhile, Harris came in with relatively little fanfare and looked really good until running into Shavkat Rakhmonov, which is about as forgivable loss as you can get. Right. I mean, what I want to know from you is 170 is one of the toughest, most crowded divisions in the sport, obviously. Do you see top 10 upside for either of these guys at this point? I mean, Nurmagomedov, win or lose, he's only fighting once a year. Like, how much shine do either of these guys have for you right now?
Top 10, I wouldn't say top 10 because, like you said, the division is hard as it gets. I mean, if we were, I don't know who's in our top 10 right now, but like,
dude, Shavkat Rakhmonov is number 9.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So that sums up everything you need to know about. No, I don't see either one of these guys that good, but could I see guys with a winning record in the UFC? Yeah, I could see that. And that's an accomplishment in itself too. So how about this, man? When's the last time a Nurmagomedov has been an underdog in MMA, in any major MMA organization?
And he's the original other Nurmagomedov. Like, it's almost like a running joke now, but he was the original guy that back in 2017, 2018, they were like, oh, he's Khabib's brother. And then, next, well, actually, he's his cousin. And then a few months later, well, actually, there's only like 4 last names in all of Dagestan.
They shared a Netflix account with one.
Yeah.
he let Khabib use his password or something like that. Yeah, it's funny. If you were ranking the Nurmagomedovs in all the major MMA organizations, I think I'd put him last. But I did just say that he's still a pretty good talent. So I was surprised by the betting line that he's the underdog just simply because of the last name.
Yeah.
Abubakar, he's a southpaw who he throws really hard. He works behind a jab, throws a lot of hard punches. He will throw a naked uppercut, which I hate. He's going to get thrashed. He's going to get knocked out for that. It might even be this fight that happens. But all his striking is to set up his wrestling. He's not your different Nurmagomedovs. He's your traditional grimy wrestler. He's going to shoot for takedowns. He will shoot without some setups. He's a good wrestler. He's constantly shooting and reshooting. He gets the fight to the ground, heavy top pressure. But he's not Khabib on the ground. Like he will even stall. Like kind of hold down. Doesn't have the best takedown defense too. Like I've seen him get taken down by lesser opponents, which is surprising. He is hard to hold down again because he's Dagestani. But like I said, on top, a little bit of a lay and pray. He is a submission threat. But based on his heavy grappling, this has led him to slow down, even in fights that he's won. Like he beat Jared Gordon, but he's still like slowed down in that fight. Now, Carlston Harris, I've said this before about him. He reminds me of Alex Oliveira based on his like frame. He's this long-armed guy. He works behind a hard jab. Got some pretty good sting in his hands. He showed some power against Ipika Saganai. He can overthrow, which again I think that fits Alex Oliveira. But he'll wrestle too. He sets up his wrestling well with his striking. He actually, of the two guys, I actually think he sets up his entries better than Abubakar does. Good entries. He likes to get into the body locks. He uses size in there. A strong top game. Works to advanced position. He likes to attack like head chokes, like Darce chokes, stuff like that. And he has a deep gas tank. So I'm not surprised that the betting odds are close. Like I can tell the Vegas guys did their job and didn't just instantly put Abubakar as the favorite. I'm not high on Abubakar. Like I've never been that high on him. However, we have two guys who like to wrestle, and they're both top side position wrestlers. So I'm going to go with the guy who's the better of the two wrestlers, and that's Abubakar. I am worried about his gas tank, especially as the fight goes on. But I think he's going to bank 2 rounds and then hang on late. So give me Abubakar, I guess, in an upset.
Yeah, mild upset there. But I'm leaning the same way you are here. Nurmagomedov, he's had a bit of bad luck here and there. Obviously his run in PFL, that playoff system was always going to, lead to some hard luck cases because of their weird rules about draws, because especially that first season, they had like the 2 fights in one night thing, which that was real fun in like 2004.
I was leading the charge on that. I hated the 2 fights in one night. It's not good.
Well, it's not a great way.
The tiebreaker was like who won the first round.
Yeah.
Oh God! And you know what happened? They started stalling the second round.
As long as you
what happens if you have open score. I mean, they didn't have open score, but they have the idea. I'm going to win if I don't lose this round. Yes. And in the case of Nurmagomedov, it goes back further than that. I mean, the guy's a 3-time world combat sambo bronze medalist, which I mean that doesn't sound that impressive, but it's because all 3 years he ran into Yaroslav Amosov. Like it was just like the 3. So yeah, like rough timing for him. I think that guy's pretty good at winning.
He is pretty good at winning, and he was pretty damn good at sambo before he did mixed martial arts. It's like the same thing as like Cain Velasquez is probably underrated as a wrestler in college, just because if he hadn't been the same age as Cole Conrad and Steve Mocco, he probably would have won a national championship or two.
Yeah. It's like Bo Nickal. He would have been in the Olympics. He wasn't in David Taylor's weight class.
Ding, ding, ding.
I got it out early.
Yeah, thanks.
I haven't tell you my Amosov story.
No, hit me.
I think I might have, and I apologize if we're doing story time with Keith. So I was at Mohegan Sun. I don't know when it was, but me and Nolan King from MMA Junkie, we were hanging out. He's one of my closest friends in the industry. And we were there like all week doing all the thing. And we just kept laughing because we'd see Amosov everywhere. Like he'd just be by himself, just walking around Mohegan Sun. And we'd go to like the cafeteria. And there he was sitting in the corner, go in the bathroom, and there's Amosov. Like, what this guy's like popping up everywhere we look. And we were telling the story, just like, oh, he's probably like, just cleaning the bathroom or something. Like he's just like he works here. So we're saying this, and now we're saying we're in line for like the media, and then just like the general entrance to get into the place. And I'm telling the story to I don't know who we're talking to, and I look, and I swear to God, there's Amosov in a line with the fans to get in the place. He's fighting on the card. He's by himself.
He's probably like 13-0 at the time or something.
Yeah. Like he was on the main card, undefeated, and he's waiting in line. Doesn't speak a word of English.
Nope.
Like does he know that he's probably supposed to be like a half hour ago, and he doesn't have to go through this entrance? And Nolan has I don't want to give away some because Nolan actually has some even funnier stories, so I don't know if he wants people to know. But Amosov became our fun go-to guy.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm with you here. Like, if it's gonna come down to wrestler versus wrestler, I favor Nurmagomedov to win, even if he does have to hang on late. The thing that like gives me pause about that is if Harris just catches him with something and just lamps him in 3 minutes, or, you know, like stuns him and like grabs a guillotine, that wouldn't surprise me either. So a first round finish by Harris wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, but generally speaking, Nurmagomedov has been pretty defensively sound on the feet, even if Harris is going to have probably a speed and power advantage. So give me Nurmagomedov by decision as well, but I wouldn't be comfortable with it until that final horn sounds. Next up at UFC Vegas 71, we have a men's flyweight matchup between Tyson Nam and Bruno Silva. Nam, the 39-year-old Oregon native, is 21-12-1 overall. He is 3-3 in the UFC since debuting in late 2019. He did win his last time out. It was a first-round knockout of Ode Osborne at UFC on ESPN Vera versus Cruz last August. He'll look to make it 2 straight against Silva. The 32-year-old Brazilian is 12-5-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He, right out of the gate, beat Khalid Taha, choked him out in the 3rd round. That was overturned when he tested positive for a banned diuretic. Right off of that overturned win, he lost 2 straight against David Dvorak and Tagir Ulanbekov. After that, he rattled off back-to-back wins over JP Bays and Victor Rodriguez. The most recent of those, the Rodriguez fight, was all the way back in May of 2021, knocked him out in exactly 60 seconds. Layoff of nearly 2 years, but he is looking to make it 3 straight, and he is a moderate favorite to do so. He's minus 165. Nam is plus 130. Keith, neither of these guys is a top 10 flyweight. Neither of them probably will be. They seem to have settled in as what they are, but they are 2 of the harder hitting flyweights in the division, in a division that still is kind of short on people with like serious, like punching power. So this fight has that much to recommend it. Who do you see winning this one and how?
Yeah, and I'm just surprised that we're even talking about Tyson Nam in the UFC at 39 years old and in 2023. That's, if you asked me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed about it. But not only is he in the UFCs, but he's winning fights, and he's looking good. I mean, the guy's 39 years old at flyweight. I think the reason why he's doing good is he's fighting at a much slower pace, but he's throwing hard shots and he's knocking guys out. I mean, he's a boxer. I shouldn't say knocking. I mean, he knocked his last opponent out. Yeah. He's a boxer who has good timing in his counter striking. He showed that. He landed a perfect strike against Ode Osborne. He's a bit of a hold your ground, beat you at the point of attack type fighter. He's got good power for the division. 13 KOs in his career. He loves his overhand right, though he can look for a little bit too much. I do like that he will work the body. He doesn't check leg kicks, which is an issue. That's a big target against him. And he's not much of a wrestler. Like when he does go for a takedown, he's looking for upper body locks. If on top, he has some good ground and pound. I go back to the Jerome Rivera fight. He had a lot of success from the top position, ground and pound. But he's fought like 34 times, I think. He's got 1 submission, so he's not much of a submission threat. I don't think he would be against Bruno Silva. Silva moves well. Good footwork, quick hands, tight boxing. He attacks with combinations. I'd say plus power. I'd definitely give Nam the power advantage. But I mean, Silva has back-to-back knockout wins, so he's got that going for him. Good calf kicks. He's been hurt, though. He got hurt by David Dvorak, especially when he was worked to the body, something that Nam does well. He will wrestle. Good entries. Though he got out-wrestled in his 2 losses, David Dvorak and Ulanbekov. Like, Ulanbekov took him down. That's not Nam's game, but he – just something to think about. Silva is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has some really slick back takes, but he slowed down in fights. I think the weight cut gets to him a little bit. Like he slowed down against David Dvorak. So this is a tough fight. Nam has looked good, but I'm going to go with the favorite. I'm going to go with Silva, though. He has a better output on the feet. He's the more well-rounded fighter. I think we get some good exchanges, but Silva's takedowns will be the difference. So giving him an edge, so I'll take Silva I'll say by decision.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Silva, I mean, from like kind of his build, like being a short, compact, like muscular flyweight to, I mean, you mentioned just kind of like his solid boxing game. It's no surprise that he is a like Pitbull Brothers / Erica Barstein disciple, because he fights just like the next smaller Pitbull brother. I mean, he's not as good as
it's like
Patricio.
Is that the toys where they go into each other?
Yeah, like the little Russian nesting dolls.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying he's as good as Patricio, but maybe like flyweight Patricky, like the.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but I'm definitely with you in that I'm surprised that Tyson Nam made it to the UFC, let alone that, he's doing all right. He's 3-3 and he's beaten some decent guys. Like Zaruka Dashev isn't a bad fighter. Ode Osborne isn't a bad fighter. Most of it, I mean, and you look at his record looks pedestrian, but a lot of that is because he spent almost his entire career fighting at bantamweight because there wasn't really a division for him to drop to in any sort of respectable promotion. It definitely kind of turned a corner for him when he could finally drop to 125. And here, yeah, he's mellowed out as a fighter. He's not that wild. He's not wild like he was earlier in his career. Defensive wrestling is less of a problem for him, I think, just because his opponents are smaller, although it's still not great. And his power is just, he's got better power. Like he lamped Adashev. He knocked out Osborne. If Silva turns to his wrestling and leans on his wrestling, I think you're right here. Like he'll get enough takedowns in at least 2 out of 3 rounds to win a decision. And at 39, the wheels have to start falling off for Nam at some point. But weird as it is to say, at 39, he seems to be fighting the best he ever has. And I can't think of another time I've said that about a flyweight approaching 40, but I say it about Tyson Nam, and I'm going to lean towards Nam here for the slight upset. I think his power and his reach are going to kind of give Silva pause on the feet. Silva's been gone for 2 years, and he already had a hard weight cut before. I don't picture that getting better for him because he's going into his mid 30s himself. So I'm going to say Nam is able to hold on. Silva might be a little too tired late in the fight to get the takedowns that he needs. And yeah, Nam just kind of fights his mid-pace kickboxing match, stings Silva a few times, and picks up 2 rounds out of 3. We head now to the bantamweight division for a matchup between Victor Henry and Tony Gravely. Henry, the 35-year-old fighting out of Southern California, is 22-6 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC early last year. He debuted with a unanimous decision win over Hani Barcelos at UFC 270 in January. Came back in October and dropped a unanimous decision to Raphael Assuncao, who appears a little further up this card. He will look to get back to winning ways against Gravely, who will be looking to do the same. The 31-year-old Virginian is 23-8 overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Javid Basharat at UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Song in September. Previous to that, he had won back-to-back fights over Simon Oliveira and Johnny Munoz Jr. So 2 bantamweights looking for a win here for sure. Henry is the slight favorite to do so. He is minus 140, Gravely plus 110. Keith, tell me, who is the real Victor Henry and who wins this fight?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I don't know. Because one fight he looks like, oh my God, this is a top 15 guy. Next fight he's losing to Raphael Assuncao, so and losing bad. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. He's so inconsistent. Like I said, he looked tremendous against Barcelos, looked terrible against Assuncao. It's tough to tell who he is. Good things he does. He's elusive, got some good footwork. Had really good volume against Hani Barcelos, technically sound, setting up his attacks well with feints, switching stances and mid combination, which I like. Never been a big power puncher, so that's kind of a negative. But he's got a good kicking game. big part of his game. Always kicking to all areas of the body. Teep kicks up the middle, then quickly to the head. I'd say kicks are his best weapon. Not much of an offensive grappler. In the sense, not much of an offensive wrestler, I should. Definitely a jiu-jitsu grappler. He's hard to take down, strong takedown defense, good hip control, can sweep off his back, and good cardio. Bad guy, trigger shy, getting beat to the point of contact by Raphael Assuncao, not stopping takedowns, just getting beat everywhere. That's bad. Tony Gravely. It's funny. He was a guy who was really known for his wrestling, and now he's known for being like a power puncher. He explodes off his back foot, closes distance really quickly to unload combinations in the pocket, throwing everything hard as far as his wrestling. Explosive through your hips kind of guy. He does make the mistake of wrestling underneath when sprawled out upon. We've talked about this in the past. He's gotten beat up there. And Henry showed some good takedown defense, so that could happen in this fight. If he's on top, strong top game. He controls, works slowly, works position. He has been beat up a little bit on the feet. I go back to like when he's slugging it out. Nate Manis hurt him. Javid Basharat pieced him up, but I would pick Basharat over both of these guys right now.
Back to back on the same night.
Yeah, I don't know if I go that far, but yeah. As far as his ground, like his wrestling, I don't know why I mixed up these order, but he's good at securing a position before landing shots. He has been accused of laying and praying early in his career, but not so much in the UFC. He's got some pretty good ground and pound. His cardio is a little bit of a question mark because he throws everything hard, and he wrestles a lot. So if you can weather early stalls from Gravely, you can take over late. This is an insanely tough fight to pick. I think it's one of the hardest ones to pick. If good Henry shows up, I think he wins. He has the volume. He has hard kicks. He has strong takedown defense. If he definitely has the tools to be Gravely, but then he's looked terrible against Assuncao. So I'm going to go with Gravely. I guess I'm going to go with the upset. He's the better wrestler. He hits harder of the two. I think we get some good exchanges on the feet, but I think Gravely's smart enough to look for some takedowns. And I think he might have to hold. I think it's similar to the opening fight where he might have to hold on late, but I'll say Gravely by decision.
I'm glad that you are apparently as in the dark about the real Victor Henry as me, because he's been in the UFC for 2 fights now. This will be his 3rd. And not only have I picked his first 2 fights wrong, I picked him grotesquely wrong. Like debuting, and I think he even stepped in on short notice against Barcelos. At that time, I still thought of Barcelos as this is a top 10 guy on talent that just needs to get healthy and start fighting 3 times a year. He's taken a step back from that, but I figured Henry's a fun fighter. Like I was always excited to see if Victor Henry would make it to the UFC. He's a longtime Josh Barnett disciple, so he brings kind of a unique grappling game. As you mentioned, he's an exciting striker. I'd seen him in Ryzen. I'd seen him in several Japanese promotions. He'd seen him in Deep, but I figured he'd be a fun fighter while I thought Barcelos was a really good fighter, and Henry schooled him. Then next fight around, like the ghost of Raphael Assuncao is not going to have anything for Victor Henry, and Assuncao beat him bad. So I've been super, super dead wrong about both of Henry's fights in the UFC so far. But here I'm with you because, and these are some of the same notes that we'll revisit when we talk about Assuncao's fight with Davey Grant. But the problem for me was in the Assuncao fight for Henry was a 40-year-old Assuncao who was never a blindingly fast guy, even in his athletic prime. Like Henry was just like throwing naked kicks with no setup and getting countered right in the face by Assuncao over and over again. Like Assuncao just caught him clean and kind of like rocked him and like made him like, shake his head and back off like 3 or 4 times in that fight. Those same punches from Gravely would put Henry down. Like that fight's going to be over, or at least enough damage that Gravely's probably going to win the round. And that's why I'm leaning that way. I see more avenues to victory for Gravely, where Henry, even the good Henry who beat Barcelos, would have to kind of duplicate that performance to beat Gravely, because Gravely should be able to get takedowns. And if he does, he might find Henry willing to work for submissions off his back, which, I mean, great, but that's still not a great route to victory, in the modern UFC. And on the feet, Gravely countering Henry and his like kick happy game just seems like a way for him to do damage and win rounds. So I've got the slight upset here as well, and I think I've picked 3 upsets in a row to start off this card, but in fairness, they're all really close lines. But yeah, give me Gravely in another mild upset.
Yeah, look at you, man.
And this is
always how the dogs.
And this is after that UFC 285 where like all but one of the favorites won.
Yeah. Like, no, the underdog who won was Alexa Grasso.
Yeah. We head now to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Ariane Lipski and JJ Aldrich. Lipski, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 14-8 overall. She is 3-5 since joining the UFC as the outgoing KSW flyweight champ. She lost her last time out. It was a quick knockout at the hands of Priscila Cachoeira last August at UFC on ESPN, Vera versus Cruz. Prior to that, she had a unanimous decision win over Mandy Bohm. And then before that, she had back-to-back losses to Montana De La Rosa and Antonina Shevchenko. So Lipski, the once highly touted free agent, has lost 3 of 4, coming in rather dented and dinged into this fight with Aldrich. Aldrich, 30-year-old Colorado native, is 11-5 overall. She's 7-3 in the UFC. She also lost her last time out. It was a second-round submission by Erin Blanchfield. That was last June at UFC Fight Night, Volkov versus Rosenstrike. Prior to that, Aldrich had won back-to-back-to-back fights over Courtney Casey, Vanessa Demopoulos, and Jillian Robertson. Odds here find Aldrich a comfortable favorite, minus 245, Lipski plus 195. Keith, we mentioned earlier on this card that, if you told me a few years ago that Carlston Harris and Abubakar Nurmagomedov would meet in the UFC and Harris would be the favorite, that'd be mildly surprising. Dude, if you told me 3 or 4 years ago that Ariane Lipski and JJ Aldrich would meet in the UFC and Aldrich would be a greater than 2-1 favorite, I would have laughed. Because I would have assumed that Aldrich would have washed out of the UFC by now and Lipski would be like in title contention or maybe have already had a title shot against Valentina Shevchenko. Oh, and by the way, if you told me that Shevchenko wasn't champ anymore, that would have added to my surprise. But Aldrich has just greatly overperformed. I mean, she's 7-3 in the UFC right now. That's one of the better records of anybody in the women's flyweight division. And Lipski is just, I mean, she, like 3 of her engines are on fire, and she's trying to land the plane at the airport. And her only win in her last 4 fights is against Mandy Bohm, who might not even stick in the UFC. I mean, I know she pulled out of her last fight sick or with injury, and like she might just get cut. It's not been great for Lipski. Aldrich has not just stuck around the UFC, but has like seemed to sort of improve. I mean, Lipski at this point is busted as a prospect. Aldrich, do you see any top 10 type upside in Aldrich? Or hell, I mean, is she getting close now?
She's getting close. Yeah, there's a lack of athleticism that would keep her, I believe, from the next tier. But she continues to get better and better every fight. I mean, she's a southpaw who's got some really solid boxing. She's a counter striker with good hand speed. She's got some good footwork. She likes to circle back and pull her opponents into her punches to land shots. Her straight left is probably her best punch. She can be a little bit of a headhunter, and she's a point fighter. She isn't a big power puncher, which is another thing that probably keep her from the top of the division. But I mean, we've seen her have success against some good fighters. I mean, out of everybody in the UFC, she's had the best success against Erin Blanchfield than anybody else has. She can be. I remember when she was overpowered by Sabina Maia. It's still in my notes, and I probably should take it out by now. But that always stands in my head, which is really surprising me that she lost the clinch battle against Sabina Maia. but she's an underrated offensive and defensive wrestler. I liked her fight IQ that she showed against Courtney Casey, where her natural tendency is to be a southpaw boxer. Instead, she's like, oh, I'm going against Courtney Casey. Let me turn it into a wrestling match. So I like that. She also showed some strong takedown defense against Vanessa Demopoulos in that fight. As far as Ariane Lipski, it's getting tougher to find things she does well at this point. And she seems like she's doing the opposite. She's going the other direction. She's a pressure striker that if she wins, she's winning with volume. She's a kickboxer, so kicks are a big part of her game. She lacks power, though. I mean, you mentioned she beat Manny Baum. She did drop Manny Baum, but I don't put much stock into that. She can't handle pressure right now, and she gets bullied. I mean, Priscilla Cachoeira just ran right through her. I mean, that was a mismatch. She's not a grappler at all. I mean, she's a weak defensive wrestler. She got, and this is going back a while now, but she got out-grappled by Antonina Shevchenko, which obviously has not aged well. She can find submissions, though. So she does have 3 career submissions. As far as the pick goes, I'm on Aldrich here. I think she should be a bigger favorite. I think she works her in the inside. I think she goes to the takedowns very similar to the Casey fight where she's like, she struggles on the ground. I can get the fight down to the ground. Give me Aldrich. She might even find a stoppage with some ground and pound, or she could even get her first career submission, which she doesn't have. But I'm gonna say she gets a stoppage. I'm gonna say Aldrich. I'll go late, third round TKO from ground and pound.
You basically just took everything I was going to say there, especially the part about maybe it's time to put the Sabino Masso loss in the rear view, because that's a little over 3 years ago. And I have carried the note since then that Aldrich isn't physically strong and can be bullied and thrown around by UFC level flyweights, because Masso turned out not to be UFC quality, but even while she was in the UFC, one of her biggest problems was she was kind of tall and thin and just not very physically strong. And she, kind of mauled Aldrich in the clinch. But Aldrich just isn't the same fighter anymore. She doesn't look. I mean, it's not like she's added 15 pounds of muscle or anything. But you pointed out against Demopoulos, who there's like a compact little ball of muscle. Aldrich was the stronger fighter. Jillian Robertson, who wants to grapple but tends to lack ways to get the fight to the floor, couldn't really get the fight to the floor against Aldrich. Just Aldrich was too strong and too good a defensive wrestler. Yeah, I don't think Lipski's going to have much for her here. And Lipski's decline under the UFC lights, it will continue to mystify me until I don't have to talk about it anymore because she gets cut. Because if you asked me coming out of KSW, I would have been like, she is the store brand version of Valentina Shevchenko. Like, she's a aggressive.
Wow.
I didn't think she was as good, but I thought definite future title challenger. I was like, the rest of this division is just bodies for Val to chew up until Lipski wins 3 or 4. And Lipski still hasn't won 4. And it's like 5 years later. She was an aggressive Muay Thai striker with, not one-shot power, but overwhelm you power once she starts pouring it on. You pointed out she wasn't a wrestler like Shevchenko is, but a very opportunistic, grappler that could get submissions. And just none of that is panned out at the UFC level. No. Like the speed and explosion isn't there. You pointed out she doesn't respond well to pressure. I should just move the note over from Aldrich to her because she can be bullied. I mean, getting finished in back-to-back fights by Antonina Shevchenko and Montana De La Rosa is those are not the performances of a future contender at all. Lipski is really just hanging on by fumes here, and if Aldrich just mauls her like both of us think she's going to, this might be the end of the Ariane Lipski experiment in the UFC, because I have the feeling that she commanded at least a semi-premium price coming out of KSW. And her first 4-fight stint in the UFC, which was probably her first contract, ended with back-to-back wins. So she probably didn't even take a pay cut after those first 4. But give me Aldrich here to kind of push her around. Aldrich will probably end up taking this thing to the ground because while she can strike with Lipski, I think she has a real advantage on the ground. I expect a lot of this fight to take place with Aldrich in top position, just kind of feeding Lipski elbows. And I have the exact same call as you here. Give me Aldrich to finish a discouraged, bruised, beat up Lipski in the third round, probably on the ground. Next up, the bantamweights take the cage as it is Mario Bautista versus Guido Cannetti. Bautista, the 29-year-old Arizonan, is 11-2 overall. He's 5-2 in the UFC since joining out of LFA and Combate Americas. He is on a 3-fight winning streak. Those victims being Jay Perrin, Brian Kelleher, and Benito Lopez. All three of those took place last year. The most recent of those, the Lopez win, was a sassy reverse triangle armbar finish in the waning seconds of the first round at UFC Fight Night, Rodriguez versus Lemos. He's going to look to make it 4 straight and kind of insert himself potentially into the rankings and mint himself a future title contender against Cannetti. The 43-year-old Argentinian, yes, you heard that right, 43-year-old, still plugging away, 10-6 overall, 4-5 in the UFC. And while the strength of schedule is not equal, he is on a 2-fight win streak of his own. He lost 3 in a row with some lengthy injury layoffs in between from 2018 to 2021, came back last year and won both of his fights, those being a first-round TKO of Chris Moutinho at UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Ankalaev in March, then came back in October and choked out Randy Costa in just 64 seconds. So Cannetti looking to get an improbable 3-fight win streak going in his 40s. He is not favored to do so. To put it mildly, Bautista, by far the biggest favorite on the card. Unsurprisingly, he is minus 950, Cannetti plus 600. And for these lines, I usually will just take a median of the 4 or 5 most respectable / popular North American sites. Minus 950 on Bautista was the best I could find.
Yeah,
most of the all the other sites were over minus 1,000. Keith, neither of us are betting people. This is not a betting show, though obviously we have to talk about the odds because, you know, people use us as handicappers. Is Mario Bautista over Guido Cannetti safe, relatively speaking, as 10-1 favorites go?
I don't know how to answer that because I mean I don't know when you'd bet 10-1, but if I was setting a line, I probably would put it even bigger. It was so funny that he said something. I'm not as well spoken as you are, man, but he said something like, you know, he's trying to show that he's a contender for the title by beating Guido Cannetti.
Well, considering that he like ran right through Brian Kelleher last June, the Cannetti matchup does sound odd, and I don't think this is even a late notice thing.
No,
I think this is just the fight they made.
Yeah, I mean they don't like Guido Cannetti. I don't know. Bautista, he's a very well-rounded fighter. He's fighting with a lot of confidence right now. He knows he's improving. He's looking better and better each fight. He's a pressure fighter who just, I mean, like his last fight against Benito Lopez, he just marched him down and just teed off on him. Technically sound, uses feints and footwork to keep his distance. Go back to the Kelleher fight where he was freezing Brian Kelleher with his feints, cutting angles when attacking, good footwork. He's showing increasing power. He'll throw a flying knee just because that's when he's feeling himself. Strong calf kicks, good in the clinch. He showed improved wrestling. I mean, that was never part of his game. Now, when he took down Brian Kelleher a couple times, he hit a tremendous foot sweep against him. He took down Benito Lopez, easily mounted him, had some slick back takes. He's got back-to-back submission wins with both of them look really impressive, especially the Lopez one. Go back to like Miles Johns where, you know, he's trying to take him down as a good wrestler and he's stopping takedowns from Miles Johns. And even when he was taken down, he's popping right back up. I mean, he really does look like a top 15 guy. Guido Cannetti being 43 years old. Yeah, what are we doing? The guy should just retire after his last win. Like, go out with a win. he's got back-to-back wins, so I like that. But this is going to end bad.
I mean, dude. Jumping from Chris Moutinho to Randy Costa to Mario Bautista.
Oh my gosh!
It is that merging into the 80-mile-an-hour freeway traffic on your bicycle. Like you're going 20 miles an hour on your bike, and you're like, I'm doing all right, and then
like what are you doing? It's like you're at the bar with your friends and you see this like cute girl at the bar and you're like, yeah, maybe I'm feeling good. I got my best shirt on, and you go over, you kick it to her, and all of a sudden you get her phone number. So you're like, yeah, you feel like the man. You like hop over to the next bar, and then all of a sudden you see it and it's like, I don't know, one of the Kardashian sisters over there, and you're like, dude, I want to roll. Let me go. Like, what are you doing? Like, sit down, brother. Like, what are you doing? Mario, the Kardashian, Bautista. So what Guido Cannetti does well, he can fight out of both stances. He's still pretty explosive. His hand speed has slowed a little bit, but he's tightened things up since then. Like he used to be kind of a wild man. He still don't get me wrong. He still gets in the pocket and unloads power shots, but he's a little crisper and more technical in the way he does it. His left hook is his best blow. He still likes to brawl and he has power. I mean, he lamped Chris Moutinho. He going back to like Marlon Vera. He hurt Marlon Vera. Not like where he's gonna hurt him, but I mean, like he stung him a little bit. He's got some strong kicks, hard kicks to the body. His inside leg kick from the southpaw stance is his like best weapon when it comes to kicks. He throws some hard leg kicks, but sometimes he won't set him up, so he can be open to counter. He hasn't fought the guy that can counter him yet, though. He mixes in takedowns from the clinch and from distance. Like he can get him from both positions. But the biggest issue at his age, I'm worried about his chin. I mean, he was hurt several times by Marlon Vera, which again has aged well. But I mean, Becquerel knocked him out, which recently, so that's not good. I mean, in fairness, the biggest argument for his chin is that he went against Mano Martinez and made it the distance, and Mano Martinez is a power puncher, so that definitely aged well. But Cannetti's shown that he has some game left, with some grit left, but he's faced two of the lowest level UFC fighters in Chris Moutinho and Randy Costa. This is a massive step up against Mario Bautista.
Arguably the two lowest available at the time.
Yeah, arguably, yeah. And this is a terrible stylistic matchup. I mean, I think Bautista smashes anywhere he wants. I see him battering up his legs. I think he might hit a few takedowns. I'm gonna go, even though he could knock him out on the feet, I'm gonna go with this like ground Bautista that's coming out of nowhere. I think he finds submission. I think Bautista subs him in the very first round.
No notes, Dad. Give me Bautista, like kind of stretching it out to the second round. Cannetti has shown good survivability, and Bautista, while he is just surging with confidence right now, I could see him going, okay, this is a minus 1,000 favorite. Let's not let anything silly happen, and being just a little bit more deliberate, but all Bautista all day. Give me Bautista by second round submission here, and I think the UFC will have no choice but to give him a serious step up in competition in his next fight. Next up at UFC Fight Night 221, we have a middleweight matchup between Sedriques Dumas and Josh Fremd. Dumas, the 27-year-old Floridian, is a perfect 7-0 in his mixed martial arts career. This will be his UFC debut. He fought on the Contender Series last August, guillotined Mate Penaz in just 47 seconds as a slight underdog. That punched his ticket to the big show, where he will meet Fremd. The 29-year-old Pennsylvanian is 9-4 overall. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC last spring. He dropped his debut to Anthony Hernandez by unanimous decision, came back in October and got choked out in the second round by Tresean Gore. So he's still looking for his first UFC victory. He is a slight underdog in that pursuit. He's plus 115, Dumas minus 145. Sedriques Dumas is, I mean, the dude is a rare story for mixed martial arts. We're talking about a guy who's in 2020,
yeah, we're going to talk about that.
In 2023, like a decade removed from Kimbo Slice, like over a decade removed from Kimbo Slice, over 15 years removed from Jorge Masvidal. We have a guy who got into MMA just from having fights in his backyard, actually had his like own mini startup backyard fighting promotion, got on World Star. Like that's, and you know, at that point started taking actual fights, several of them in Masvidal's promotions like Game Bread and Icon, before getting the call from the Contender Series, and then meeting a guy in Fremd who just a much more conventional road to the UFC, like standout high school wrestler who instead of wrestling in college, you know, kind of started boxing and took a few fights and got signed to LFA.
No backyard fights for him.
If he had any, nobody recorded them. Like, let's just put it that way. But Dumas, there's not a whole lot of depth to his game at this point. He is a big dude for 185, and just an aggressive, you know, bread and butter kickboxer, hard kicks that he's very willing to throw, and an opportunistic submission game. He just basically snatched a guillotine, kind of forced it against Penaz on the Contender Series. It's not like Penaz like just shot into the guillotine. You know, they kind of collided. He forced the guillotine, had a good squeeze, and got the tap out quick. He's got all the potential in the world, but he's yet to face anybody that's really even forced him to go to plan B. Like, I have no idea like how much depth there is to his game. Fremd has definitely disappointed, at least from my expectations. I saw him on LFA, and I saw him as a guy that, this guy's pretty well-rounded. He's a big, huge framed guy for the weight class who's a pretty good wrestler and is a pretty solid boxer and can take care of himself on the ground grappling-wise. I figured, okay, a guy with that physique, that well-rounded, he has some upside at the UFC level. But, you know, if we're in a video game, maybe I thought he was a 7 in every category, and he's more like a 4 or 5 in every category, because none of those tools have really worked for him at the UFC level. Hernandez was a big ask for his debut. Like, Anthony Hernandez is a really good fighter, but I figured Fremd would be the better wrestler against Tresean Gore, and Gore like picked him up and slammed him. On top of that, Fremd's boxing looked really, looked sharp at the LFA level, and just both of his UFC opponents have kind of beaten him to the punch and just outstruck him. He's starting to look like a guy that I'm not sure he does much at a UFC level. He's still just 29, so I mean that's not like written in stone. He has time to turn things around, but Dumas has far more upside. Give me Dumas to probably knock Fremd out. I don't think Fremd is going to be able to get Dumas down if he wants to, and if he sticks around on the feet, Dumas just hits with so much more power and has such superior hand speed. I think Fremd is going to be kind of stuck on the gunnery range and isn't going to have any safe places to go. If he tries to clinch, I could see Dumas just kind of, wrapping and grabbing another guillotine like he did, or just kind of mauling him in the clinch. But give me Dumas by first round knockout here.
Excuse me. Fremd, he's a really big guy.
Yeah.
He's big for the weight class. A pressure striker, uses a lot of volume, works behind a jab, throws, straight shots. His left hook is probably his best punch, but he lacks power too for a big guy. He's been rocked a lot. Doesn't have the best speed, doesn't have the best defense, doesn't check leg kicks. You mentioned his wrestling. He can wrestle a little bit, especially if he gets in the clinch and uses his size, but he's not a powerful, he's not an NCAA wrestler, He has 3 sub wins, but excuse me, he hasn't looked good in the UFC so far. Dumas, he's 27 years old, 7-0. He's a long and lengthy guy. He's a kickboxer who he just springs at his opponents. He's really explosive off his back foot, closes distance so easily by taking one step. It reminds me of the way Kevin Holland moves, where he steps long. Serious power, kicks everywhere, body kicks, calf kicks. Defensively, he does make the mistake of backing straight up instead of keeping his head on the center line. He's physically strong for a guy. He has that long man strength. He is a submission threat. We saw a beautiful guillotine. Before I make my prediction, I want to say this, and this is a little promotion for Sure Dog. I'm writing an article on Dumas right now. Hopefully it'll be up in the next day or two. Well, I know if you're listening to this, you're like, wait, Keith writes for Sure Dog? I actually write every once in a I used to write a lot, but there might be a reason why they said, hey, go do the podcast stuff. But I saw the tweet. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter where I apologize. I'm not sure which guy, but a upstart MMA journalist, media guy, reached out to Dumas to do an interview, and he's like, yeah, I'll do an interview for $100. And it's like, what? We don't pay for interviews. That's just not what we do. And then him and Abe Coward doubled down.
Okay. Yeah.
Instead of saying they're sorry, you completely come off like a dick. Like, just admit, like, all right, we're sorry. We don't have time. Like, don't look down on someone who's a starter, because especially if you started fighting in the backyard, you probably should have an idea like where people come from. Like, you didn't just, your first fight wasn't in the UFC. So we've all started very, very small. So don't be that. But while I was like responding to this tweet, people, like one or two people said, hey, have you seen this guy's criminal record? Like, he's not a good person. So I told people I'd look into it, and I did. And that's what I'm writing an article on. I don't think this guy should be fighting in the UFC. And I'm going to expose that. And Bloody Elbow has done a little bit. I've actually got the police report from the Pensacola Police Department and a couple other things. This guy makes Greg Hardy seem like the Dalai Lama. Like, he's not a good person. And I want to say that not everything on his criminal record, not everything's convictions, but I understand how the courts work. There was at least probable cause to make an arrest. Okay. And the police report I got, he wasn't arrested in, but it's one of those ones like, your wife cheats on you. You know, she says she's gonna be home by 9. She starts showing up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't give her the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think this guy should be fighting in the UFC. Anyways, back to his actual skill. The guy's good. Like, what I've seen, he's good. I don't think Fremd is good. So I'm gonna go with the upside of Dumas. I say Dumas knocks him out in the first round.
All right, there you go. 2 picks for Dumas to win by first round knockout and continue to be a problem, maybe. Next up, we have the third of 5 men's bantamweight fights on this card, as it is the ageless Raphael Assuncao versus Davey Grant. Assuncao, the 40-year-old Brazilian, is 28-9 overall. He is 12-6 in the UFC. Make that 15-8 if you include his WEC run, which you absolutely should. He won his last time out. It was a surprisingly one-sided unanimous decision over Victor Henry last October at UFC Fight Night, Grasso versus Araujo. That, for Assuncao, put the brakes on a 4-fight losing streak that probably had him fighting for his job in October, but he passed that test and will look to make it 2 wins in a row here. He had been scheduled to take on Kyler Phillips, which frankly would have made it a little more difficult to get that second win in a row, but Phillips was forced to withdraw with an injury, and in steps Grant. The 37-year-old Brit is 14-6 overall. He is an even 5-5 since joining the UFC out of the 18th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He won his last time out as well. It was a 3rd-round knockout of Louis Smolka last May at UFC on ESPN, Blachowicz versus Rakic. Prior to that, he had lost back-to-back fights against Marlon Vera and Adrian Yanez. Odds here do slightly favor Grant. He's out there around minus 160 or so. Assuncao plus 130. Keith, I think I said before our last Assuncao prediction, I maintain this. He is the most anonymous, most unsung, longtime top 10 contender in UFC history.
Yeah.
Like, he had a run in the UFC where he won 11 out of 12 fights. The only loss was to TJ Dillashaw. And by the way, that was Dillashaw winning their rematch because he beat Dillashaw the first time they fought. I mean, for a guy that was within a fight of fighting for a UFC title multiple times, he's about as anonymous as they come. And I understand the reasons why. He's a short, stocky Brazilian who doesn't speak a ton of English, and most of his fights aren't super exciting. But I mean, criminally underrated and misremembered. Yeah. And I count myself there as well. I mean, the people he beat on that run: Dillashaw, Pedro Munoz, Aljamain Sterling, Marlon Moraes, Rob Font. Like,
that's a hell of a run.
Yeah, he fought almost nothing but like top 10, top 15 guys, and went on like long winning streaks. And even that 4-fight losing streak, he never got a break. He lost to Marlon Moraes
either. Never got a title shot.
Never got a title shot. I mean, if he'd beaten Dillashaw at UFC 200, he would have gotten a title shot off of that, I'm sure. If he'd beaten Sterling or Moraes, he would have been right there, like up near the top of the phone call list. But the UFC was never going to call Assuncao if there was any other option.
Yeah.
For all the reasons I just mentioned, like fair or not, like, you know, Keith and I both tiptoe, or I mean, we don't tiptoe around. We tell the truth, but you know, we try to be as fair as possible, saying, hey, you know, this woman is going to get promoted if the UFC can justify it at all because she's very good looking and charismatic.
Well, Ben does that. I don't.
Keith's a perfect gentleman.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a beauty contest going on the men's side as well, and Assuncao fails that beauty contest miserably.
He's an ugly duckling.
And then, you know, he's just kind of physically nondescript. His fights, you know, are typically grindy. I mean, he was a submission machine early in his career, but at the WEC UFC level, he's a decision machine. And yeah, and just not a whole lot of sizzle on the mic. But dude, he got Marlon Moraes, Corey Sandhagen, Cody Garbrandt, and Ricky Simone in a row. And he's no one to blame but himself for being like Garbrandt's lone victim there.
Yeah,
but
like
the rest
38
of them,
years old or 39 years old.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying he's fighting the best he ever has, but he's fighting the same as he ever has. Does he get it done against Grant here, who's pushing 40 himself?
Oh, man.
Oh, and how bad would Kyler Phillips have lit this dude up?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second.
All right.
Yeah, as you mentioned, 40 years old. He had a stretch in the UFC where he looked really good. Then he looked really bad. He did look a little renewed against Victor Henry. He's a counter striker that fights out of both stances. He has this like rare ability to get, and this has been prime Assuncao. We've talked about Andre Arlovski having this and Yoel Romero and stuff. He has this rare ability to get guys to fight at his pace, which is, even his prime was a low output distance kickboxing fight where it's technical. He stays tight, throws combinations, got some good calf kicks. Then he closes distance and he grinds in the clinch, looks for a body lock takedown. If you throw a kick, he can catch a kick and take you down. He will shoot through your hips, but he's not one of these elite wrestlers. He did get, like, even though he looked bad and he lost, he did get 4 takedowns on Corey Sandhagen. He's always been an elite grappler. Not, he's got 10 submission victories, not your Damian Maia racing somebody, but just that, more like a
mini RDA.
Yeah, that's exactly the guy I was gonna say.
Because he looks like RDA.
He does look like him too, yeah. But yeah, they're built the same way. But that style, more of a topside grappler, control and position. Based on his age, I am worried about his cardio. If someone actually could push a pace against him and didn't get like hypnotized by him, I am worried about his durability. I mean, he was knocked out by Garbrandt. He was knocked out by Ricky Simone in back-to-back fights. You mentioned Garbrandt knocked him out. Ricky Simone knocked him out. I didn't say Sandhagen, did I?
No.
Okay, sorry. All right. For some reason, I had a brain fart for a second. Move over to Davey Grant. Davey Grant, man, this guy has grown on me. Like, he's not a great athlete, but he's a true blood and guts type fighter that another guy, like we talked about, Tyson Nam, like, still being in the UFC would surprise me. Like, I would have put Davey Grant in that category, but he's been good. Like, he's insanely tough. He stalks his foe and he just beats him with volume. He throws hard looping punches, very like Fedor-ish the way he throws the punches, but he has surprising speed. Please
note, Keith just said that Davey Grant is like Fedor.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. Just get him a sweater and we'll call him the GOAT. He can crack, man. The guy, I mean, he knocked out Martin Day. He knocked out Jonathan Martinez, which is that fight, that win has aged extremely well. He's got a good kicking game. He likes that like Holly Holm sidekick, but he also attacks the calves. He smashed Louis Smoker in his last fight with calf kicks. He prefers to strike, but he will sneak in a takedown to win a round. He's intelligent like that. If taken down, he's got a good get-up game. He has 8 subs on his record, so he can catch someone in a scramble. Even this version of Raphael Assuncao would really surprise me if he could caught Assuncao in a submission. But I mean, that maybe like a club and sub kind of thing, but like straight catch him in a submission was surprising. But I mean, he hurt Adrian Yanez in a fight that was very close. He just, regardless of, so he's been hurt himself too, though, to finish. So Giannis hurt him. Martinez had moments against him. Even Day had moments against him. But despite being hurt, he just continues to come, and he has a card to press a hard gas tank. Now, I feel much better about Assuncao now than I did his last fight, but it's still hard to trust his cardio, trust his durability at this point. Davey Grant, to me, seems like the guy that could challenge that, could get in there, get in his face, fight his game. He throws hard and he throws a lot, and I think eventually he catches Assuncao. I'm going to say Davey Grant knocks out Assuncao. I'm going to see he does it in the second round.
All right. I know that this show is spicier when Keith and I disagree a lot, and I don't just kind of like bonk, like stick my rubber stamp on what Keith said, but I think I've done that on about half the fights on this card, and this is another one.
Plus, you're not going to go against the GOAT.
I mean, I'm not going against Davey Grant with like, they'd have to be 2 big ass ice cream cones for him to really be Fedor, but you know what I mean. Or that old wooden cross around his neck would have to like be like Flavor Flav size stuff. I mean, we talked about Victor Henry just before this, and I floated the question, and you agreed with me that it's an open question whether the Henry versus Assuncao fight was due to Henry either just underperforming or not being as good as we thought, or Assuncao just finding another gear at age 40. And I checked, he was already 40 at the time of that fight. And we both picked Gravely in the Henry fight, indicating that, okay, yeah, we're fading Henry a little bit, which tells me that, okay, maybe Assuncao hasn't really recovered prime form, but he just got a matchup that he could win. And I don't think Grant is that. I'm with you here. Grant's going to look a lot bigger in the cage. We have him listed at 5'8" and 135, but he's a guy that just always seems to be the taller, lengthier fighter in the cage. And against a stocky fireplug like Assuncao, that's really going to be the case. Give me him to catch Assuncao with some of his like wild winging Fedor hooks. Assuncao, if he wants to get this thing to the ground, I'm not sure he'll be able to. Grant, for a long-legged guy that strikes as aggressively as he does, has pretty solid takedown defense and get-up game. I think this is going to be kind of a rough time for Assuncao. Who knows if we get a retirement in the cage, but I think we'll be wishing for one if it's as ugly as I think it will be. And I have Grant by second-round TKO as well. Next up at UFC Fight Night 221, there are 2 heavyweight bouts on this card, Keith, and one of them is really good. This is the other one. It is Karl Williams versus Lukasz Brzeski. Williams, the 33-year-old Atlanta native, is 7-1 overall. This will be his UFC debut after winning on the Contender Series last September. In that appearance, he beat Jimmy Lawson by unanimous decision, punching his ticket to the UFC, where he makes his debut. Waiting for him will be Brzeski. The 30-year-old Pole is 8-2-1 with 1 no contest. Overall, he is 0-1 since debuting in the UFC out of the Contender Series. Little bit of confusion there because he won on the Contender Series last September. He got a 3rd-round stoppage against Dylan Potter. That was marred by a bit of controversy because Potter did not appear to have tapped, but Mark Smith stopped the fight, called it a submission win for Brzeski. I mean, that's controversial, obviously, but Brzeski was about a minute away from probably winning the fight anyway, whatever. But then it was overturned shortly afterwards anyway, because Brzeski tested positive for a banned performance enhancer. Despite that, he did end up keeping his invite to the UFC. He debuted last August at the same UFC on ESPN Vera versus Cruz card that several of the fighters on this card fought on, and he lost a split decision to Martin Buday. So two gentlemen looking still for their first win in the octagon. Williams is actually a moderate favorite to get it done. He's minus 170. Brzeski plus 140 on the comeback. Keith, I mean...
You know what I just realized?
What?
I watched the Brzeski fight against Buday, and obviously he lost. And I thought he won, but not that I thought like I was scoring and I thought he won. Just Buday is so bad that I just
like, you just assumed he won.
I just automatically put it as a loss. Like I watched it, and yeah,
I don't well until a couple days ago, I didn't remember the Brzeski versus Buday fight at all, even though I think I was even on the Sherdog scoring team for that one. Just my brain washed it out.
You don't watch it all the time, like Let's pull out the old classic.
I mean, I'm definitely going to toss this one to you first because I don't give a shit.
Yeah, of course you are.
But well, I don't want that dude in our comments like coming at me being like, you talked for like so many minutes and like how inconsiderate to Keith. I was like, you think so? Okay.
You've never watched this before. Yeah, like I don't talk.
I mean, we got two guys here. Williams, former light heavyweight, who wasn't a good light heavyweight, especially. Brzeski, who this is about a rough road as you can get through the Contender Series and still get the a berth in the UFC. Who wins this one, and do you care?
Yeah, I care. I wouldn't do the show if I didn't care. You know what?
Well, no, wait a sec. Okay, Matt, like you're a police officer. You have spent plenty of time in courtrooms, obviously, testifying. What if we had peremptory challenges? Just two attorneys, looking at the jury. We could each pick one fight on each card. We're like, I'm not previewing that fight. Fuck that one. That one's gone. How quickly would it be this one on this card?
Let me look at the card. It might be. Because
there are plenty of mediocre fights on this card, but this was mediocre and took tape study.
No, I would get rid of Fremd versus Dumas because you mentioned court.
Dumas. Okay,
you mentioned court, so
speaking of court, all right, yes. Speaking of your peremptory challenge,
I have been in a courtroom a lot. Apparently not as much as Dumas though. But
let's say it's
Jesus. Yeah, let's. Okay, Brzeski. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. I'll say this: for a heavyweight, he has really good volume. He has insane output for heavyweight. He brings the action. He's got quick hands, busy jab. He loves his overhand right. He lacks power for heavy, which is probably why he has so much volume. He just pillow punching out there. Throws a lot of kicks, a lot of teep kicks, though they're often naked. He keeps his chin high in the air, just this massive target to get cracked. He lacks head movement on top, which is obviously not a good thing. He can grind it in the Muay Thai clinch. He will look for takedowns, more of a catch a kick kind of wild thing to get it down. He's not a very technical grappler. If he does hit the ground, he advances his position. He's got some good ground and pound. And I mentioned he has good cardio. He's going to go hard for 15 minutes. Now, Williams is already 33 years old, so you don't like that for some guy making it in his UFC debut. Now, heavyweight obviously is so much different. I always have to put that little caveat there. That's little asterisk. We're talking about heavyweight, but this is going to surprise you. I've liked the stuff I've seen of him. He's definitely a smaller heavyweight, former light heavyweight. He's a good athlete. He's got some fast hands. He's got a good jab. He throws a straight shots down the pipe. I think he hits hard. some good teep kicks, good calf kicks, checks leg kicks. But what I like most is what I saw in the Contender Series. He's a good wrestler. He out-wrestled Jimmy Lawson. Jimmy Lawson was a Penn State University wrestler. For those who don't follow NCAA wrestling, Penn State is the best wrestling school in America in college. They win every national championship. They're going to win. The national championship is 2 weeks from now. They're going to win that one. They won today I was watching the Big Ten championship. They won the Big Ten championship. Like
over the last 10 or 15 years, it's not even close.
Yeah, they're the powerhouse wrestling organization. Mm-hmm. So to wrestle there is wrestling any Division I is impressive.
And Lawson was twice the size.
And Lawson was much bigger than him. He got some body lock takedowns. He shot through his hips, held him down, ground and pound him, and did it for 15 minutes. Like, he didn't slow down. So I think this could be a fun action fight. I like Brzeski's reckless, abandoned style. However, I'm leaning Williams. He hits hard. He's a good wrestler. I think he lands a few takedowns. He probably wins this decision. What did you say the betting line was?
Williams minus 170, Brzeski plus 140.
Okay, all right. I thought it was a little closer than that. I like Williams even more than that, though. So, like, if you're a betting man, like negative 170, yeah, give me Williams. I think the fight's gonna look a lot like the Contender Series matchup where he's just hitting takedowns and beating him up from on top.
Cool. Do you have that as a decision? You think?
I'll go with the decision.
Yeah, I mean, and I should point out, most of the reason I hesitate on Williams is that he just hasn't faced much, like, he hasn't faced like a very high level of competition. Like, Lawson was the first even decent fighter with any kind of appreciable upside that he's really faced. On top of that, he's a late convert. I mean, he didn't even debut as a pro until he was past age 30, which at least he's competing in the one division where that's not going to prevent you from, having a nice long career, but you would like him to have had more than 7 or 8 career fights at age 33. Brzeski, I'm all the way out on this guy. He does some fun things, but one thing is, I mean, if you're watching us on YouTube rather than listening to the audio, if you see Brzeski's Fight Finder photo underneath our faces right now, and he looks like an MMA fighter from a movie, he does not look like that anymore. He's from Poland. I'm just going to say that Poland is famously less regulated than the U.S. when it comes to performance enhancers. See also Lipski. But by the time he debuted in the Contender Series, he did not look like that. Oh, and by the way, he still popped for roids. And then when he fought against Budai, a year later, he looked even less like that. I mean, he's condensed 15 years of Mark Kerr's career into like 2 years, basically, just like going from like a superhero into like a melted candle. Ironically, considering Williams is the former light heavyweight, Brzeski looks like a light heavyweight who just has, like 20 pounds of kind of extra stuff on him at this point. I don't think he's going to be able to stop Williams from taking him down if Williams wants to. And I think Williams is probably going to kind of mash and maul him once they get there. You have Williams by decision, and I can certainly see that. But I could also see Williams getting a TKO on the ground after 2 or 3 rounds of just kind of abuse. So I'll just, for the sake of being different, I'm going to go with that. Give me Williams by third round TKO, ground and pound. But this might be a quick experiment for Lukasz Brzeski in the UFC. Next up at UFC Vegas 71, we have yet another matchup of Contender Series veterans looking for their first win in the octagon, where one of them has already had a chance and just not gotten it done. It is Vitor Petrino versus Anton Turkalj. Petrino, the 25-year-old Brazilian, is a perfect 7-0 as a mixed martial artist. He fought on the Contender Series last September, where he knocked off Rodolfo Bellato in the second round. Makes his debut now against Turkalj. The 26-year-old Swede, who goes by the Pleasure Man, and boy, does he need to change that.
Good for him. Good for him.
That is I really don't want to have to say that.
That's why he's gonna. Hey, when he's at the bar and he runs to the Kardashian, that's what he's gonna introduce himself as.
I'm the pleasure man. Yeah. Kill me. All right. He won on the Contender Series last July, taking a unanimous decision over Ocasio dos Santos. He got the short notice call up to fight Jailton Almeida just about 6 weeks later at UFC 279. They met at a 215-pound catch weight, which played right into Almeida's hands since he was on his way up to heavyweight anyway. But for Turkalj, who does intend to ply his trade at 205, it was a tall order, and he got the moral victory of making it almost to the end of the first round before getting choked out. So second chance to get it done here for Turkalj. He is the slightest of underdogs in that pursuit. Petrino right now is minus 140, Turkalj plus 120. Keith, I mean, tell me how you think this one plays out. Turkalj got a super tall order as kind of a grappler himself against a bigger, stronger, better grappler. Yeah. Like throwing that aside, do you see much upside for either of these guys at 205?
Yeah, poor Turkalj. Imagine you get a call on 10 days notice to make a UFC debut. You're like, oh man, it's already hard because you're stepping up in competition going to the UFC. You're getting on short notice. You got to move up a weight class. Oh, and you're going against Jailton Almeida. Like, what the fuck?
Well, and I'm sure he was like, oh, cool, it's at 215, so the other guy won't be too much big. Oh, shit.
Turkalj, he's a minus athlete. He stands tall. A lot of arm punching. So not generating power, not a lot of technique. Bit of a brawler on the feet. Throws a lot of combinations. I give him that. He throws a lot of kicks. He attacks with calf kicks, but he throws naked kicks. He's open to counters. All of his striking does. He wants to close the distance. He wants to get in the body lock, look for like a trip takedowns. Definitely more of a BJJ grappler than he is a wrestler. So he's there's nothing pretty about his grappling. He's not a submission threat or anything like that. So I shouldn't say BJJ grappler, but I mean he hasn't spent time in the wrestling room. He's a BJJ wrestler. Like, okay, let me grab you single. Okay, you fall down. Like, but he's got good cardio. I'll give him that. Now, move over to the pleasure man, 25 years old. He's very athletic, explosive, fast hands, nice snap on his shots, throws a lot of hard hooks, power in both of his hands. Even better when he works the body. I love his body shots. I like in the Contender Series, he was, as a fight, his opponent was getting in in the pocket. He was starting to turn the punches to elbows, trying to catch him with like slicing elbows coming in, stepping knees, quick, powerful high kick, good movement. He was surprising, even though he looked really good in the Contender, he actually got clipped briefly and was dropped. Good wrestler, shoots for takedowns, good top control, good ground and pound. He doesn't have any subs on his record, but when Bellotto, who's his opponent on the Contender Series, who's known for his grappling, got on his back and backpacked him, he didn't panic. He slowly inched to a better position where he reversed stuff. So based on what I just said about both guys, I think you probably know which way I'm leaning. I think Petrino clips him. I think Petrino knocks him out. I'm going to say Petrino knocks him out in the very first round. Maybe a high kick, maybe like a short hook or something. But I like Petrino moving forward. Negative 140. I think it should be closer to negative 200. So I'll give you a second one. I put another bet on that one if I'm a betting man. Give me Petrino.
Yeah, yet another fight where I wish I had more intrigue to offer the listeners here, but there are some guys in the UFC light heavyweight division that Anton Turkalj could beat. It's a division without a ton of fight IQ, even going all the way up into the top 10. There's a lot of fighters that are incomplete fighters or make lots of mistakes. It's like the diet version of lightweight, or of heavyweight, which is exactly what it is. So there are guys he could beat, but this is the second fight in a row where he's just getting a real tough draw because he is, and disregard what his record looks like. You look at his record, he's got 5 TKOs and 2 submissions, and he's the 6'4" Swede. You picture what he's probably like, and he's not. He has a bunch of knockouts and TKOs, but he wants to grapple. It is his background. It's where his pleasure lies. But he's not much of an athlete, and he's a bit of a finessey grappler when things are on the ground, which just made Jailton Almeida the worst imaginable matchup for him. Petrino is not much better of a matchup, and for the reasons you mentioned, Keith, like for a guy that I don't know his exact background, but didn't panic when Bellato was threatening. Also, fought off some of his takedowns like very ably. Like Turkalle's not going to be able to get takedowns on Petrino, and he's going to have to try. And in trying, he's just going to have to come into range. And he is. I'm with you. He's going to get clipped. He's a tall guy that doesn't help himself by, he stands tall, his chin's way out there, doesn't have any head movement. He's slow of hand and foot, and Petrino is explosive. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could differ with you here, but Petrino's going to clock him, and he's probably going to clock him in the first round as Turkalle kind of barrels forward looking for, either a clinch takedown or, the kind of tall man, like, collar and knee tap or ankle pick type takedown. He's not going to get it against Petrino. So yeah, give me Petrino by first round TKO here. And as young and kind of obviously athletic as he is, interested to see what he does next. We head now to the featherweight division for a matchup between Ricardo Ramos and Austin Lingo. Ramos, the 27-year-old Brazilian, is 16-4 overall. He's 7-3 in the UFC. Most recently, he fought last June at UFC on ESPN, Cater versus Emmett, where he plunked Danny Chavez with a spinning back elbow just a minute and 12 seconds into the first round. So he's going to look to keep the good vibes going here against Lingo. The 28-year-old Greater Dallas native is 9-1 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC as a former standout from LFA. I mean, he would have been in line for a title shot if he'd stuck around, but he joined the UFC about 3 years ago, debuted against Youssef Zalal, dropped a unanimous decision there, came back and fought twice in 2021, winning both times, beating Jacob Kilburn and Luis Saldana. But that Saldana fight in August of 2021 is the last time we saw Lingo. So a layoff of about a year and a half, going on 2 years. But he's back, and he is a pretty big underdog. Ramos, minus 320, Lingo plus 240. Keith?
Wow.
I mean, both of these guys are pretty young for as many long layoffs as they've had. Because I've just, without looking, when I started pulling up information, I assumed Ramos would be 32 or 33.
Yeah, I agree.
Because he's fought once a year for what seems like forever.
And he gave up on him and stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's like a junior version of the Hani Barcelos thing. We're like, man, every time he fights, he seems pretty good, but he just doesn't fight enough. And he's still just 27. And Austin Lingo, I mean, I was surprised that it's been over a year and a half that he's been gone. And then once I realized that, I was surprised that he's only 28. That means when he's got signed to the UFC, he was like 24 or 25. And yeah, I mean,
well, he was training. He was one of these guys who he grew up training MMA.
Yeah,
there's a legend story of him living with Donald Cerrone when he was 14 or something like that on the ranch.
He probably saw some shit he shouldn't have seen at that young age.
What are you saying? Saying Donald Cerrone wouldn't be a good babysitter?
Oh my goodness! I mean, he might now that he has a kid of his own and is all responsible. But at that age, a decade ago, no, you don't want that. Kid's gonna have a sippy cup with Bud Light in it. All right. Ramos is a greater than 3-1 favorite here. I mean,
yeah,
hit me, man. Tell me what you got. But
yeah, I don't like that betting line. I just don't. I mean, a guy who's been out, both guys who've been out that long, and based on their ages, and they're at the ages where they can make big improvements. I don't think he should be a 3-1 favorite. I mean, I understand him being a favorite, but that big is pretty massive. Ramos, he's a really good athlete. That's the first thing that I think of when I watch him fight. He's a Muay Thai striker. He can be a little too patient at times. Throwing single strikes. He's got a great kicking game. I mean, such dexterity in his hips where he can just throw up a high kick with ease. I love his question mark kick. He loves throwing spinning attacks, which I don't like. But I mean, it's been a minute, which is kind of the case with Ramos. But he did have that incredible spinning knockout of Ayman Sahabi. He likes to work from distance. That's where he wants to do. The key to beating him is to press him on his back foot. I mean, you go back to like the Tukhugov fight. That was what he was able to do against Ramos, and he's not comfortable there. If you crowd him, he's best. Like he's weaker striking that. He's best if he's got to like initiate a plum clinch, and he can kind of, because he's a very traditional Muay Thai guy where he can wear in there. I don't think he gets enough credit for his wrestling. He's got some good body lock takedowns. He showed some good wrestling takedown defense against Tukhugov. Though I do think Tukhugov's, and we've talked about this, I do think his wrestling's a little overrated. Ramos is a good grappler, strong top control. He's got 7 submission wins. He uses those long legs to make it hard to shake off your back. Like we see him like getting in those hooks in and just that like long man's leg riding. He does play BJJ off his back, which I don't like. Now Lingo, he's a pressure striker. He marches forward. He throws a lot of hard shots. He generates good power because he sits on his punches. His counter right hand is his best strike. His left hook is another good strike. He will work the body. He showed serious power on the regional scene. I mean, you go back before he was in his UFC debut, he has a 13-second knockout, a 25-second knockout, and another 25-second knockout. We haven't seen that power to that level in the UFC, but he probably has it. And of course, I understand that some of that knockout is lesser competition, but still, the cracking guys that quickly shows you got some power. He's a weaker wrestler. I mean, go back to the Yusuf Zalal fight. Yeah. Zalal had so much success wrestling him, and he really struggled to get back up. I'm a little worried about Lingo's health. I mean, he hasn't fought in 2 years, and he's been scheduled twice since that stretch, and he pulled out twice. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm assuming he's healthy for this, and if I'm Lingo's corner, I'm telling him, get in his face, throw bombs, make this a brawl. Because if he doesn't and he gives Ramos space, Ramos can really work him from the outside. If he lets Ramos get inside and get some takedowns, Ramos is really good there. I don't think Ramos should be a 3-1 favorite, but I do think he should be like -175, something like that. I think he outpoints him from the outside with a speed advantage, gets some takedowns. You know what? I'm gonna say he locks in a submission too. No, I'm not gonna say submission. I'll say Ramos by decision.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out about Lingo, that he's been booked several times in the last year and a half, and in both cases it was him who withdrew due to injury. So it does make you wonder what he's going to look like when he comes back. Like, even if he's not diminished from where he was, might not have made the strides that a 27, 28-year-old fighter otherwise could have over that stretch of time. Almost every time he fights, I'm just reminded of how promising he is. And still at this point, he's only lost to really good fighters in the UFC. He's lost to Said Nurmagomedov, who we're going to talk about in a minute, Zubair Tukhugov in a close fight, and then got crushed by Laurent Murphy. But I mean, speak of people that are super promising and just disappear because of injury.
I forgot the guy existed.
And then you remember, oh, right, that guy's undefeated and beat some really good people before he disappeared like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But assuming these guys are basically the same, that they have been, that they're trending in the same direction, I like Ramos in this one big time as well. Like, I'm not 3-1 confident in him just because it's hard to be, but he definitely has more avenues to victory. I think he has the advantage on the feet, just more power, the ill-advised spinning back elbow that at this point, having cleanly knocked out 2 people with it, I can't criticize him until he loses 2 fights because of it. and that hasn't happened yet. So And you pointed out he's an underrated wrestler, which is a nice safety valve. If Lingo really commits to coming forward and pressuring him and trying to put him on the back foot, a couple of reactive takedowns can really like defuse that and turn it to his advantage. If he's willing to do that, even if he's just willing to do it once or twice in the early going, that would stand him in really good stead in this fight. Just, most of the plausible ways this fight plays out, like, seem to favor Ramos. So give me Ramos in this fight as well by, I'm going to say, a pretty one-sided decision. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes all 3 rounds and Lingo just kind of looks frustrated. Next up at UFC Fight Night 221, and the fight order on this card is very much in flux, but I'm pretty confident in saying it is part of the main card, is a bantamweight matchup between Said Nurmagomedov and Jonathan Martinez. Nurmagomedov, the 30-year-old Dagestani, is 17-2 overall. He is 6-1 in the UFC since joining back in mid-2018. He lost to Hani Barcelos in December of 2019, the night that Keith and I very famously infamously on the recap ran up the UFC bantamweight top 15 and kind of played Barcelos off against them. Nonetheless, since that loss, Nurmagomedov has rattled off 4 straight wins over increasingly stiff competition. Mark Striegel to Cody Stamann to Douglas Silva de Andrade to Said Yakub Kakramanov, barely breaking a sweat in most of these fights. The most recent of those, the Kakramanov fight, was a second-round submission win at UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Strickland, back in December. He's going to look to make it 5 in a row and insert himself into even further into the top 10 and into potentially the title picture, this year. Standing in his way, the ever surprising Martinez, the 28-year-old from East Texas by way of Denver, is 17-4 overall. He's 8-3 in the UFC. He also is on a 4-fight win streak. He got knocked out by Davey Grant almost exactly 2 years ago. Since then, he's rattled off 4 straight wins over Zviad Lazishvili, Alejandro Perez, Vince Morales, and Cub Swanson. The most recent of those, the Swanson fight, was at UFC Fight Night, Grasso versus Araujo last October, where he sawed off the veteran's legs with a diet of nasty leg kicks, getting the stoppage late in the second round. Odds on this one, find Nurmagomedov a moderate favorite. He's minus 180 or so. Martinez plus 155. Keith, I have freely admitted over the last year or so that I've underestimated Jonathan Martinez. I mean, when you drop into the UFC and you lose to Andre Sukumtat in your debut, I write you off. And it apparently takes me a couple of years to kind of correct my mind on you.
That's a head scratch. That is a head scratch when it comes to losses for guys.
It is, but he was taking a huge step up. Like, it's not even like he was a guy that had like 6 fights in LFA and was just on the short list. He kind of came out of nowhere, really seemed to learn to fight on the job. And all of a sudden, he's 8-3 in the UFC. It's very much like I said about JJ Aldrich. I'm like, I thought he was not a good fighter. And then next thing I knew, he was on a 4-fight win streak and 8-3 in the UFC and knocking on the door of the rankings himself, even if he's not favored here. But for a guy in Martinez, that the best part of his game is still his kicks. I mean, he beat Cub Swanson with basically nothing but kicks in his last fight, but a guy with hard kicks with both legs to all levels. I mean, he throws them to the legs, throws them to the body, throws them upstairs. He's good at varying locations and speeds. Like he's just a great kicker, and has sort of finally started to build the rest of an MMA skill set around that. That's a tough ask against Nurmagomedov, because Nurmagomedov is of the variety of Dagestani fighter that can wrestle and leans on it when he needs to. But when he needs to and he leans on it, he's very, very good at it. So when you're bringing a kicking game as kind of your main source of offense, a couple of takedowns or just one takedown early in the first round that ends up losing you that round because you spend 4 minutes and 10 seconds on the bottom, has a way of defusing that. So much as I'm pleasantly surprised to see Martinez's development in the UFC bantamweight division, I think this is where he's probably going to hit his ceiling, at least for the moment. I mean, and I'm not the only one who thinks that, since Nurmagomedov is almost a 2-1 favorite. But I mean, Barcelos is the only guy that's beaten Nurmagomedov in the UFC, and he did it by managing to equal him both in the striking and in the wrestling department. And Martinez just isn't going to have that for him. Give me Nurmagomedov by a dominant decision here. And I imagine it's going to be some rinse and repeat takedowns. And if Martinez starts to get tired, discouraged, worn out later in the fight, Nurmagomedov could start teeing off on the feet as well. So yeah, give me Nurmagomedov by a lopsided decision here.
Well, yeah, I'm not nearly as confident as you are. Nurmagomedov, he's well rounded. That's the first thing I think about, and you kind of touched on that. He's very calculated striker, technical, good, like point fighter from distance. He will explode when there's an opening. Almost like whips his punches. He's got good speed, good power. He makes a mistake of leaning back a little bit when striking, trying to avoid getting counters. So he does lose a little power with that, but overall, a good striker, good kicking game. Another guy we talk about his dexterity. He can kind of sneak in some high kicks into his combinations, which hides because of his threat of takedown and all this other stuff. I've compared his kicks in the past to like Stephen Thompson, where he like throws it as the last thing in the combination that kind of just almost like you feel like you're safe, and then all of a sudden you get like a question mark kick in the head. He's a good wrestler, as you said. Like he doesn't, for Nurmagomedov, he doesn't wrestle enough, but when he does, he's good. He's good at winning scrambles. He does need to improve his top control. That's because he's a really good submission artist, and he goes for things. I think he's got like 5 or 6 submissions in his career, including the one in his last fight where he jumped on a beautiful guillotine. Martinez, southpaw, tactical striker, great from the outside. He just kind of pops shots with ease, fast hands, accurate, crisp jab. I love that he works the body. I love that he's added some step-in knees to his game. And you mentioned everything starts with his kicks. I mean, he's got some of the best kicks in the game. His teep kicks, his calf kicks are absolutely brutal. He tosses a bunch of high kicks to keep his opponent honest, and he does it with ease. But like he'll toss a high kick and then come right back down to a calf kick. He throws kicks in his combinations. I like. He throws some flying knees. He's not much of a grappler. He hardly ever looks to get the fight to the ground. But in fairness, he did take down Cub Swanson. But he's been hurt. Davey Grant, clipped him and hurt him. So that's concerning. I think this fight is fire. I think this is one of the best fights on the card. I think Martinez is like a sniper right now. But his kicks, as you mentioned, is such a big part of his game. And I don't know if that's that tool that he can really access in a guy like Nurmagomedov. He's going to have to go down to the calves, because if he goes to the body or he goes high, it's not going to be wise. Nurmagomedov's going to catch a kick or just bull rush him when he does it. Until he shows me he can stop top takedowns, I got to lead Nurmagomedov. I think we can have some more. I think we're going to have some fun moments, but the takedowns of Nurmagomedov gives me the victory. I'm going to say Nurmagomedov by decision.
We head now to the light heavyweight division for an intriguing top 10 matchup that was originally scheduled to be the headliner of UFC Fight Night 220 just 2 weeks ago, was bumped on fight day, like after the weigh-ins. I can't remember whether it's after the event actually started, but no, I think it was. Wasn't Allen versus Muniz bumped up to the main event? During the card.
Yes, I remember I said I thought something happened to Tatiana Suarez.
Yeah. It is Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann. That one was canceled due to an illness on the part of Krylov. We were not given any specifics, just that he was ill and was not medically cleared to compete. I will just speculate wildly. When something happens between the weigh-ins and the actual fight night, it's usually fighters rehydrating, just eating and drinking, like they're very dehydrated. And he would not be the first fighter that just got a case of like bad diarrhea and vomiting, got dehydrated again, needed an IV, and regardless of all the Makhachev controversy, like needing an IV, like after the actual event starts is going to be a non-starter for, being able to compete that day. I wouldn't be surprised if it were something like that, but it's not like he broke his ankle or got COVID or something that is probably going to make either of us feel very different about this fight 2 weeks later. Keith, I'm going to just plug in that preview right here. I mean, do you feel any different about your pick? All right, then I'm not even going to bother putting that weird, like, old-timey filter on this because, it was 2 weeks ago. I had the same haircut. So, yeah.
I didn't.
All right, Keith got a new haircut in the meantime. And if I did, you wouldn't know anyway because I usually wear a hat. Krylov, the 30-year-old Ukrainian, is 29-9 overall. He is 10-7 across 2 different stints in the UFC. He is 4-4 since returning most recently. He is on a 2-fight win streak. Knocked out Alexander Gustafsson last July at UFC Fight Night, Blades versus Aspinall. That was the UFC London 2 card. Came back at UFC 280 in October and took a unanimous decision, fairly one-sided, over Volkan Oezdemir. He will look to make it 3 in a row against Spann. The 31-year-old Texan is 21-7 overall. He is 7-2 since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. He also is on a 2-fight win streak. Since getting submitted by Anthony Smith back in September of 2021, he rattled off 2 straight wins, choking out Ivan Kudalaba in May, and then coming back in November at UFC 281 and knocking out Dominic Reyes in the first round. Odds here, fairly close, but Krylov is a moderate favorite. He's -150, Spann +120. Keith, we just finished talking about the co-main event, and I mentioned that, I've had to kind of get wise to the idea that Brendan Allen is in no way a bust. He's just still a hot prospect who's hit a few speed bumps. I've got to think the same thing about Ryan Spann. Yeah. And honestly, to a lesser extent, even Nikita Krylov. I mean, again, if you go back far enough that you remember his first heavyweight fights in the UFC literally a decade ago when he was one of the youngest people on roster and he was this pudgy 232-pound heavyweight and also sucked at fighting and was terrible. It's hard to believe that he is a legit, borderline contender, a guy that skirts around the edges of the top 10. This fight is pretty legit. I'm with you that the co-main event is probably a little higher level and more divisionally relevant than the main event, but this main event is nothing to sneeze at. Krylov is the same fighter he's always been at light heavyweight, just a slightly more refined version. When he finally dropped to light heavyweight in his first run through the UFC, he turned into a light heavyweight who's big, very athletic, has a variety of weapons on the feet as well as on the ground, a finisher, but terrible fight IQ, questionable cardio, and frequent defensive lapses, which is why he's barely over 500 in the UFC. And he's not quite on that Michael Johnson level, but in that same realm of, dude, your best wins and your worst losses are so weird to hold up against each other. That's still the case today. His cardio is a little better, but it's still not great. And you still need a little cardio to do well at 205. At least the best guys at 205 have good cardio.
Yeah.
The fact that since he's been back in the UFC, he beat Open St. Preux, and that's a guy that he literally got Fawn Preux choked by the first time they fought, but outgassed St. Preux, didn't get caught up in the chaos and just beat him bad. And then again, against Johnny Walker, a guy where this has every possibility of Krylov winning until he loses and lets Johnny Walker do Johnny Walker things to him, and didn't let that happen. That gave me hope for him. And then he goes right into letting Paul Craig be Paul Craig.
Yeah. Yeah. The Ankalaev loss isn't bad, but the Paul Craig submission is bad.
It's just, dude, it's all he does. Why? And I mean, and Spann, I'll be able to say this about him as well, but beating a very faded Alexander Gustafsson and a very faded Volkan Oezdemir just doesn't give me enormous confidence in him. Like, I'm not sure that he's turned a corner. I think maybe he's just fought two guys that, in the case of Gustafsson, didn't last long enough to test his gas tank. And in the case of Oezdemir, ironically, since Oezdemir used to be one of the scariest knockout artists in the division, just no longer has what it takes to take advantage of Krylov's defensive lapses. Like, a guy that throws as wild and throws as many head kicks as Krylov and doesn't protect his chin, if they'd even met in like 2016, Oezdemir would have lamped him. That's Krylov to me. Spann, it's all still there for the taking, man. He's in the team photo for the biggest light heavyweight in the history of the sport. Like, I'm sure Johnny Walker is a few pounds heavier on fight night, but Spann is titanic, and his height and his wingspan and the length of his legs is every bit as big. He generally uses it pretty well. Has crushing power, but I think of him as a little bit wild as a striker as well. He's got 2 losses in the UFC. The Johnny Walker one is questionable. You know, Johnny Walker probably should have been, if not disqualified, at least, warned, penalized, restarted. Then, lost to Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith might just be a better fighter.
That's a good loss.
And since then, he has easy wins over Kudalaba and Reyes. Kudalaba is like the poor man's Krylov, and Reyes is every bit as faded as the people Krylov's been fighting. So one guy's going to get his 3rd straight win here, move a notch up in the top 10. The other guy will take a step back. I'm leaning Spann, even though he's the underdog here.
Wow.
If Krylov is smart, he'll try to wrestle Spann. He's a good offensive wrestler. Spann is all legs and tries to defend takedowns with a guillotine. Like, if Krylov is smart, he'll wrestle Spann.
It's a good guillotine, though.
Yeah. The thing is, betting on Krylov to be smart, I'm past it. I expect instead Krylov will, try to throw head kicks. He'll come in swinging wildly. He'll force the clinch, which is not where you want to be with Ryan Spann. And I think Spann will punish him. Give me Ryan Spann by, I'm going to say 2nd round TKO here. Just wears down Krylov because Spann, he hasn't had to go past the 1st round in a while, but he's been fine the few times he's had to. Granted, he was winning those fights, and when you dictate the pace, your gas is better. But give me Spann to maybe have a bit of a wild 1st round, but catch Krylov in the 2nd. All bets are off if Krylov shoots a takedown on the first 30 seconds, even if it's just to keep Spann honest, but I'm not betting on it.
He shoots it without a setup. He might get a guillotine. That guillotine's pretty good, though. He jumps for it. It's pretty good. This should be just a fun fight. Like, I agree. It's going to answer. I don't know if it should answer questions, but it's definitely going to propel some guy much higher up the rankings, where it's hard to get excited about both these guys because, again, the wins aren't that exciting. This would be a good win for either guy. As Krylov, he's a good athlete. He's elusive. He's got good footwork. He's got good hand speed. He does drop his hands a little bit, but he's got a really good kicking game, as you mentioned. He mixes his striking and his takedown attempts together well. I think you rank his wrestling a little bit higher than I do, but I would say he's a solid wrestler. But defensively, he's been taken down more for my liking. So his offensive wrestling is good. I think his overall wrestling I'm not as high on. He has a submission threat. He has 15 career subs. He almost caught Glover Teixeira at a submission, so that tells you everything you need to know. One of the greatest grapplers in the history of the division, or history of the UFC, regardless of division. I don't like that he was hurt by Volkan Oezdemir, but he did show his ability to recover, where in the past he would have done something wild and got clipped or something. And I used to think he didn't have the greatest cardio, but I think it's more of a body language thing now, where he's a guy who he looks like he's tired. Where if you look at his output doesn't drop. Even in a fight where he looked tired. Now, Spann, you mentioned, is a huge man, long and lengthy. On the feet, he's a patient striker. I think he's showing more improvements in his striking. He was really good at picking up the timing of Dominic Reyes in his last fight. When he does throw, he throws some serious power. He put down Dominic Reyes with a jab. His left hook is a crushing shot. I don't think he gets enough credit for his ground game. He's got 11 submission wins.
It's 12 now.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. 12 submission wins. You mentioned his guillotine. His guillotine is a specialty. He caught Kudalaba in it. He almost standing triangle choked Sam Alvey. Again, that's Sam Alvey, but like that's not a guy that you submit. I would be shocked if this fight goes to the judges. I think both guys are finishers. I'm with you, man. I'm going with the upset. Krylov has been cracked a little too much for my liking. I think if Span lands a big shot, lands a big blow, he could put Krylov down. Or if Krylov makes a mistake, reaches down for a single, leaves his head there, shoots a double without setting something up, Span can jump on a guillotine. So I think that's what's going to happen. I'm going to say that I say Span hurts him and then he jumps on a guillotine. So give me Span by first round submission.
Next up, what is going to end up as the co-main event of UFC Vegas 71, unless the rescheduled Krylov versus Span fight ends up bumping it, is a heavyweight matchup between Alexander Volkov and Alexander Romanov. Volkov, the 34-year-old Russian, is 35-10 over the course of his well-traveled mixed martial arts career. He is 9-4 since joining the UFC as a former M1 Global and Bellator heavyweight champ. He has alternated wins and losses over his last 5 fights, but he is on the upswing of that back and forth pattern. In his last appearance last June in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 207, he knocked out Jairzinho Rozenstruik in just over 2 minutes. So he's going to look to break out of that pattern by winning 2 in a row, and standing in his way will be Romanov. The 32-year-old Moldovan is 16-1 overall. He is 5-1 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that the one was his last outing. He came into UFC 278 last August, undefeated at 16-0, dropped a majority decision to Marcin Tybura. So he's going to look to bounce back from his first career loss, and he is ever so slightly favored to do so. Romanov, minus 120. Volkov available at even money, plus 100. Keith, I mean, we kind of make fun of heavyweight enough and legitimately complain about the quality of heavyweight MMA enough that, you know, our regular listeners are used to my term, you know, the obligatory unranked heavyweight slobber knocker, of which we have one on this card. But this is not it. This is heavyweight is finally deep enough that we have 2 good fighters in the top 10 fighting in a fight that does not have immediate title implications. Like, that's how deep the division is. It's almost a good thing that 2 fighters this good are getting to fight, and it's just sort of just another good fight. And not only are they 2 good fighters, they're 2 fighters that have measurably improved over the course of their UFC run. And that's not a super common thing to say about heavyweights either. Like, most heavyweights don't get better. Like, they kind of are what they are, and they just kind of ride it out.
Yeah.
Like the best you can say is
Ciryl Gane is an example.
Ciryl Gane. Like, I mean, he's going to get more chances, but right now Ciryl Gane is a fighter that is still good at things he was good at, and he ain't fixed the things that he wasn't. That is not the case for either of these guys. I mean, the overrated thing about Alexander Volkov is his pre-UFC record. I mean, he came in and he was like, oh, he was an M1 and a Bellator heavyweight champ. That sounds cool, but both of those heavyweight divisions were bad at the time, and he lost to the good fighters he fought. Like, as soon as he ran into someone good in M1, Vitaly Minakov cleaned his clock. In Bellator, like, that was back when Bellator's heavyweight division was completely awful, and once he even ran into, like, the middling...
Oh, it's not awful now.
It's better now than it was. I mean, dude, after Comrade left, like, he won a championship, and he left after losing to, like, Shek Congo and Timothy Johnson. Like, he is in the UFC. I mean, he may never fight for a title. He may never win a title, but Volkov has continued to improve. Dude, I like Volkov. I'm a fan of the guy and his development as a fighter. When he debuted in the UFC back in 2016, 2017, I mean, he was this towering guy, but frankly, he was kind of gangly, and I mean, almost like bird chested. He's like this 6'8" bird chested. Like he looked like a giant Bang Ludwig. Like he looked like this Titanic Bang Ludwig, and didn't use his height super effectively. Like shorter fighters could get in and land on him. He could be taken down, and he's really improved on that. And aside from a moment of inattention against Derek Lewis that allowed Lewis to do Lewis things to him, he's only lost to fighters who are just much better than him. Like kind of like I said about who was it on the last? Oh, Derek Brunson. He's lost badly, but he doesn't have any bad losses. Like that's kind of what Volkov has become. He's become one of the best heavyweights in history at using his height to his advantage. Like so many ultra tall heavyweights are terrible at using their height to their advantage. And the few that are good at it carve out good careers. Like think of how much mileage Tim Sylvia got out of just being willing to throw a freaking jab.
Yeah.
Like
wow.
he was
some of that has to do with the era too.
But no, it absolutely has to do with the era.
One of his title defenses was against Jeff Munson, who's I think shorter than me.
And yeah, and Jeff Munson was like, but because he was willing to throw a jab, Munson was reduced to shooting double legs from like 15 feet away. Like where he literally like come up short like a 3-year-old like rolling a bowling ball down the thing where it just kind of stops halfway down the lane. Like I mean, dude, he also beat 2 people that were taller than him in the UFC. Or he beat Wes Sims right before the UFC. He beat Gam McGee in the UFC.
Wes Sims is taller than him?
Yeah, Wes Sims is 6'9".
No shit.
Yeah. Like, but like what all I don't want to get that far off, but just
we can go down the memory lane.
Yeah. But I mean, Volkov now has a tooth loosening jab. Just that simple front kick up the middle, because he's so big, is like it's enough to keep sub elite heavyweights off him. And he's put on weight. When he debuted in the UFC, he was about 240, and like I say, like a little bird chested. Now he's like 255, and most of it he's put on his upper body. Like his legs have always been pretty thick for a guy of his height, but he's put more mass on his upper body. And aside from like Curtis Blades and Tom Aspinall, like both of whom are huge and very good wrestlers, people haven't like been able to take him down with any consistency. He's become the best fighter Alexander Volkov can be. And I think that's admirable. And there's another guy kind of on a similar track in Romanov. Like when Romanov debuted in the UFC and he was undefeated at the time, I think he was like 11-0. I remember watching the tape because he debuted after we were doing previews. I was like, well, this is going to be a whole lot of fun while it lasts, because he's like this 6'1", 6'2" guy who at the time was like 265, built like a fire hydrant, and his game was built on ridiculously overdone takedowns. Like I'm like, the minute this guy finds someone he can't ragdoll and arm triangle in 2 minutes, he's going to gas out so bad. And the UFC heavyweight division is so bad that it took him several fights to get there. Mm-hmm. But here, these are his weights in his 6 UFC fights: 261, 260, 264, 260, 237, 239.
Wow.
The third fight was against Juan Espino, and that's the one where, dude, he got the win, but he basically chickened out. I'm just going to say it. Where he's laying on the ground after that foul, and he literally asked the ref, if I can't go on, do I win, or is it a no contest? Dude, if you have the presence of mind to ask that, you can probably fight. But he was like, both guys were gassed, but he was more gassed than Espino. And like, he just, I assume he like got his hand raised, ran straight to a getaway car, and like zoomed off and went back to Moldova for his next camp. But dude, two fights later,
like a Shawn Michaels grabbing the belt when they screwed Bret Hart. And
yeah, exactly.
There you go. I got a WWF 80s or 90s WWF reference in.
Yeah, there you go. Where was that one? Whitaker versus Gastelum. Like, was that the Melbourne screw job, or was that one in Vegas? I don't remember. Anyway, but 2 fights later, he drops 25 pounds. So all of a sudden, he's this 237-pound guy, and he still like spends too much energy on his wrestling, but he's gotten a little more efficient. And in my opinion, he should still be undefeated. Like I had the Marcin Tybura fight a draw. I thought he got a 10-8 round the first round, and then Tybura won the second and third rounds. And while Tybura was the fresher guy in the third round, it's not like Romanov completely fell off a cliff and Tybura was able to put a 10-8 round on him or threaten to finish him in any way. Just it got harder and harder for him to get takedowns, and by the third round, he really couldn't anymore. So, I mean, Romanov in his own humble way is kind of turning into the best version of what, his body and skill set are, but it's a big ask against Volkov. I've got Volkov in this one because Romanov is, he's a super powerful, like Greco-Roman style takedown guy. I mean, he doesn't shoot on legs. He gets in, gets a body lock, takes the back standing, hoists you and suplexes you. And if he doesn't feel like he stuck the landing, he hoists you and suplexes you again. Like he's the kind of guy that gives himself a mat return if he didn't like the takedown enough. Like he's gonna hoist you back up and throw you again. And I think he's just gonna have to work too hard for takedowns against Volkov. It's gonna cost him because Volkov is actually pretty good at getting his hips out of the way. Just kind of and again, when not working against Aspinall or Blades, is good at avoiding too much damage on the ground, working his way back to his feet. He's good at wall walking, and I think Romanov is probably just going to wear himself out. Like even if Romanov wins the first round handily, unless he gets a 10-8 like he does against Tybura, I'm feeling super confident in my Volkov pick here. But I do have Volkov by decision in this one. It won't be the prettiest thing. It'll be an Alexander Volkov fight, but give me Volkov by the third round to just be kind of jabbing, front kicking a tired Romanov. And if Romanov really pushes the issue, Volkov has got enough meanness to really punish people that crash into his space, without setting it up with something. And I could see Romanov doing that. But give me Volkov to win a decision in this one going away.
Yeah, I was surprised by the betting line. I never ever look at the betting line for a reason, because I don't want to be influenced by it, and especially when I'm on the fence on a fight. But I do when you're talking, I try to guess a little bit what's the betting line, and I just assume Volkov would be the favorite, based on his last performance, Tybura getting a win over Romanov in their last fight. I knew it'd be close because I really think it's a tough stylistic matchup for both guys. Mm-hmm. If you were saying stylistically, who's the toughest guy? Well, not for Romanov. A really strong wrestler like a Curtis Blades. But still, what's a tough stylistic matchup? Oh, the guy who's 7 feet tall, who has that tall man's, you have to lift them up and then you got to lift them up again, So, and then, Volkov, besides the guys who's out wrestled him, like Curtis Blades and Tom Aspinall, who else is a tough stylistic matchup? Well, the guy who wants probably the best remaining wrestler in the division. But
all those other guys are ranked way higher, in their same general stratum of the rankings. Okay, I agree.
That's probably a better way of saying that tier. So I thought it would be close. I was a little surprised that Romanov, the guy coming off a loss. I just checked MMA decision. I kind of forgot how I scored it. I agree. I scored it a draw too. So I do think Romanov should also be undefeated. I like how he talked about the thickness of Volkov, because we were talking about this height, but he has put on some size, that he's not the skinny little thing anymore. He's a technically sound striker, nice jab, straight punches down the pipe. He's accurate. He showed against Rosina Rosenstrike this meanness and power that he has now. He's not just a point fighter. I love that you talk about the teep kicks, because that's such a good weapon. He's really good at pointing the toes and getting the toes to grind into your liver and stuff. If you get inside of him, he's starting to use movement well to get back to range. He's understanding how to keep distance better than he did in the past. He understands just touching and unloading power shots when there's only an opening, not wasting it. You mentioned Derek Lewis lost. That fight was such a long time ago that's the only time he gets really hurt. Ciryl Gane has that game where he can kind of work and get you to really be intimidated based on his footwork and how technically sound he is. But no one has really hurt Volkov other than that, like one punch against Derek Lewis forever ago. You mentioned that he's been taken down by Curtis Blades and Tom Aspinall. I mean, Curtis Blades took him down 14 times, which is pretty impressive. And he was absolutely smoked by Tom Aspinall. So that's obviously a concern against a guy like Romanov, a powerful wrestler. Romanov's the southpaw, who I do think you talk about his physique and his commitment changing. I was thinking his striking has improved a little bit over the time. Now, it still has like huge areas of growth, and his striking is simply, it's just, I don't know if it's even serviceable, but it's, one notch below it, but it's just to make it easier for him to close the distance where he can get to the clinch, use those upper body takedowns, the Greco-Roman style, throw a lateral drop, a bear hug, something like that. He will shoot at times, but it's definitely like not his norm for takedowns. The thing about him, besides his is just how physically strong he is. I mean, he suplexed Jay Sherman in a fight. Like, again, we're talking about the worst, one of the worst wrestlers on the roster, but he still took a heavyweight and suplexed him. Strong top game if he gets on top. Very like smothering guy, control the position, then slowly advance on the ground.
He got like a UFC 3 submission on Marcos Rogerio de Lima, just like the forearm choke.
Just
a super big man submission.
Like I'm a big strong guy. Like I think if we were lining up the UFC heavyweights, it's pure guess. If we line up the UFC heavyweights and like just had him arm wrestle, like I'm taking Romanov.
Yeah, even though he's probably lighter than the average at this point. At 237, he's on the lighter half of the UFC's heavyweights. I'd probably pick him too. What?
The only guy I think I'd take over him is I don't know how to say his name. He was the Olympic wrestler, the one that popped for everything against Dontel Mays.
Like
that guy might arm wrestle.
Hamdi Abdel Wahab.
Wahab. He might beat him in an arm wrestling match.
Yeah.
But, other than that, Romanov be up there for the arm wrestling. He's got a smothering top game, good ground and pound. He's a legit submission threat. He's got 9 subs on his record. If he can't fight on the ground and keep it there, his gas tank does fail him. I agree what you said, because I think one of the narratives heading into this fight is that his gas tank is non-existent or something like that. Like, oh, if you could survive the first round. I agree. He did gas against Tybura, but he wasn't completely shot. Like he still he just lost rounds. He lost closer rounds to a good fighter. Marcin Tybura is a good fighter.
Yeah.
So I've been really on the fence on this one. I could see Volkov just moving, picking him up range, throwing those teep kicks. I could see him catching him with a teep kick. But you mentioned that he faced, he struggled against Blades and he struggled with Aspinall when nobody else has really been able to take him down. But then when you look at his record, who else is a wrestler other than those two guys? Like nobody. I get, well, Tybura can wrestle a little bit. So in fairness, but Tybura is not the wrestler that Romanov, and we saw that when Romanov took him down in the first round. I thought I was taking an upside pick. That's why I was a little upset with Volkov being the favorite. I'm gonna go with Romanov. I'm gonna say he gets some takedowns and he wins a decision. If this was a 5-round fight, if this was the main event, I would go with Volkov.
Dude.
But being that it's only a 3-round fight, that he really only needs.
Real quick, I know it was all the way back in 2015, but Czech Congo took down Volkov in all 3 rounds in their fight.
And you know what? Czech Congo is an underrated wrestler.
He is an underrated wrestler.
We've talked about this in the past. He's not a striker. He might have a good kick background. He is a wrestler. He's the, Czech Congo is? He's the poor man's Alistair Overeem, where we talk about Alistair Overeem as kickboxing. It's like, no, he's really a wrestler at that point of his career. And Czech Congo is the same exact way.
Yeah, no, agree. He presents as this hot shit striker, but at the top level, yeah.
But again, I am still worried about the gas tank and everything, and I could totally see Volkov just throwing like a front kick and just knocking out or just picking him apart from range. Again, I'd feel much better if it was a 5-round fight for Volkov, being that it's only 3 round. I think Romanov might be able to get a takedown. He really only needs 2 takedowns and win a decision. So give me Romanov by decision.
with that, we come to the main event of UFC Fight Night 221, a bantamweight matchup between Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili. Yan, the 30-year-old from Siberia, is 16-4 overall. He is 8-3 since joining the UFC as a former Absolute Championship Bearcoots bantamweight champ and bantamweight Grand Prix champ. Of course, his UFC run has seen him become the UFC bantamweight champ as well as interim bantamweight champ. He is currently without any sort of belt and on a 2-fight losing streak, those being split decisions against Aljamain Sterling in their title rematch last April, and then a somewhat controversial split decision loss to surging superstar Sean O'Malley at UFC 280 in October. So he's going to look to snap the first losing streak of his career against Dvalishvili. The 32-year-old Georgian by way of Long Island is 15-4 overall. He's 8-2 since joining the UFC as a former Ring of Combat bantamweight champ. He lost his first 2 fights in the UFC, both of them under conditions of varying controversy.
He should be undefeated. I want to say that every time. He should be 10-0.
He should be 10-0 in the UFC. He dropped a contentious split decision to Frankie Saenz in his UFC debut 5 years ago, December 2017. Then took on Ricky Simon in April of 2018, was well on his way to winning that fight when referee Liam Kerrigan called a technical submission as time expired, thinking he had gone out to a guillotine choke. He was, in fact, quite okay. Simon gets the win. Merab gets the loss. He has gone on from there to win 8 straight. Most recently, he's kind of leveled up from fighting regular roster guys to the elite. Over the last 3 fights, he's taken on Cody Stamann, Marlon Moraes, and Jose Aldo, won all 3 of those fights. The most recent of those, the Aldo fight, was a pretty one-sided unanimous decision at UFC 278 in August. Odds here favor the former champ. Yan, minus 240. Dvalishvili plus 180 as the underdog. Keith, I'm definitely going to give this fight to you for your breakdown first, but I've got a couple observations, and I'd love to hear your agree or disagree on one of them, and then your answer on the other. My first one, Petr Yan might be a top 15 pound-for-pound fighter in terms of skills, yet he's lost 3 of 4 fights. I don't understand how those things can both be true at the same time, but I feel as though they are.
Yeah.
And so I want you to comment on that one. And the other is Merab Dvalishvili or is Beneil Dariush the person with the best case in the UFC that he's overdue for a title shot? They're both on 8-fight winning streaks in 2 of the best divisions in the sport. Who has a better case?
Wow. Okay, so yeah, Petr Yan, talent-wise, definitely a top 15 guy. I mean, he lost 2 split decisions. I always believe this. If it's a split decision, that means one person's opinion changed. I'm not saying I believe that. Everyone knows that, but if you say one guy's opinion is a win or loss, well, then he easily could have won those fights. Should you replace that one judge with a different guy, and maybe they see it for him. So you give him 2 wins in this last, we're probably talking about top 5 pound-for-pound guy, especially considering the first loss to Aljamain Sterling was extremely controversial in a fight that he was winning. Yeah. That said, and I scored the last fight for. I don't remember who I scored the fight for in the second. I really don't remember who I scored. Actually, no, I didn't score. I was watching it at a bar when I was on vacation, so I wasn't scoring. But the Sean O'Malley, I scored it for Yan. It was not a bad decision. It was a close fight. They could have went either way. And anyways, he's tremendous, but his style of fights can keep fights close. The second one was who deserves a title shot more,
Merab or Beneil Dariush, or if there's someone else I'm not thinking of.
Give me the last three opponents.
Okay. Merab's last 3 opponents are Cody Stamann, Marlon Moraes, Jose Aldo.
And Beneil Dariush is the answer.
And Beneil Dariush, his last 3 are Diego Ferreira, Tony Ferguson, Mateusz Gamrot.
Damn. When you actually answer the three guys. Like somebody that lost it, somebody that wins hasn't aged well. Like Tony Ferguson isn't that good of a win anymore. Jose Aldo isn't that good of a win anymore.
Diego Ferreira.
Diego Ferreira is not a good win anymore. Marlon Moraes isn't a good win anymore. So Leon Edwards.
and Leon Edwards, like he was, and he turned out to, kind of vindicate that when he actually won the title when he finally got it.
I mean, you're talking about probably the two best weight classes in MMA too. So this is what happens.
Yeah.
John Fitch had a run where he deserved a title shot for a long time and didn't get it.
It was 8 straight for him.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sure there's one or two other guys we're not thinking of the same thing. Yeah.
Anyway, just threw those out as food for thought. Tell me how you see this fight playing out, man.
What are your thoughts on the line? Should be closer or should be further away? I don't.
Regardless of whether I think it's a good value or not, because again, we are not betting touts. I'm not surprised. I expected Jan to come in around 2-1, maybe a little more.
I'm surprised it's this big though. I would have guessed like negative 180, something like that. Being that Merab, this is a main event and this and that. Like he doesn't have the experience in the main event that Petrino has. Okay, I get it. I think we talked off the air before we started taping, and we would talk about the betting odds without me knowing. And I said, well, Jan's gonna be the favorite. I just I didn't expect to be this big. Jan, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, but he's an amazing fighter. I mean, but the dude can't win a close fight. I going back to even his AKA days, like when he was fighting like Nurmagomedov, and he lost one of the fights to Nurmagomedov. I thought he won that fight. So, you could argue that he could be undefeated. Like he lost to Nurmagomedov, a DQ loss to Aljamain Sterling. He was winning.
Yep.
And then 2 extremely close fights. I mean, his Nurmagomedov loss isn't a robbery or anything. It was very similar, very close fights. But he lost 3 close fights and a DQ. And
he avenged the Nurmagomedov loss, and it wasn't controversial the second time. Like,
well, it was another close fight though.
It was close.
It was close, but it was. On the feet, I mean, he's so good. He's very poised. He can fight out of both stances. And one of these guys, there's a lot of guys who switch stances and they're good in both, but there's one that they're better at. But it's still an advantage by changing up. He's one of these guys that's like similar to like Israel Adesanya when I say like, what stance is he better at? Like he's good in both stances. One thing about him, which I don't like, and you've heard me say this about him many times, is he can be low output. He is this guy who's willing to give away rounds because he's studying, he's picking up tells. It's a very boxing mentality where a lot of boxers would do that, where they take rounds off in boxing to conserve energy, to learn things, to whatever. That's just you have 12 rounds. There's a reason why you can give 1 or 2 away. Anderson Silva was very similar in MMA that way, where he's studying, he'd be a little bit of a slow starter.
And until last Saturday, John Jones almost always gave the first round away.
John Jones, he'd win the round, but
wouldn't step on the gas.
He wouldn't step on the gas.
Yeah.
And then he's studying. Israel Adesanya is a slow starter. I go all the way back to the Jimmy Rivera fight because that was a fight he was way better than when he let his hands go. But due to his lack of output, he needed big punches to drop Rivera and win him rounds. He was losing the rounds until he landed a big shot and dropped him and kind of stole. I think it was maybe 2 out of 3 rounds he did that. I go back to fights like Jose Aldo and Corey Sandhagen. He gave away rounds in those fights. Now, the good thing is he has really fast hands. He marches down his foe. He is a builder. He definitely gets stronger as the fight goes on because his traps and the things he's studying and the traps he's setting, they're starting to fall into. So John Jones has that mentality where he doesn't think about it round by round. He thinks about it as a 25-minute fight, about the end, just the end result. Jan has a very similar mentality, but it's danger. It's a dangerous thing. One thing I love about his striking is he throws the spots. I've seen it. I think it was Dan Hardy. I was watching a breakdown, and who's say what you want about Dan Hardy. His technical breakdowns are fantastic.
Yeah,
which is really funny because he was never this really technical guy. But he was showing little traps that Jan was setting, and it was really fascinating. I feel like I have a strong knowledge in striking. It's but not to that level. Like, it was really good watching someone who's way more knowledgeable than I am, and explaining some of the things Jan does. He really is a master at that. He does what elite strikers do. He's besides being like smart, he's got those like the raw talent. Like, he's quick twitched, nice pop on his shots. I'd say plus power. He's not a huge like. He's a guy. He's accurate. Like, he drops guys because of how accurate. It's not because he's just if he throws a deflecting shot, he's not knocking guys out. But he's so accurate that he can drop guys. I love his straight left from the southpaw stance. I love his slip uppercut, which I'm not a big fan of, but the way he does it is really good. Good head movement. I like when he's slipping shots better than when he turtles. He does a lot of turtling up, which is a boxing thing, which leaves him open to leg kicks, which opens the body shots, which is open to getting shot on, which is something that Aljamain Sterling was doing to him. He has been hurt. I mean, say what you want about that fight against Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley hurt him. Mm-hmm. Like, listen, I got to rant on this because people still bring it up. Say what you want about Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley showed in that fight that he's an elite fighter in the division.
Oh, yeah.
I know the Marlon Vera fight was where he doesn't give him credit, and Sean O'Malley gives you plenty of reasons to hate him, right? But even if you thought he lost to Ariane, like I did, like, his stock went up.
Yeah,
he showed. Wow, he struck with Petrino and had moments and dropped him better than anybody else ever has. Now, Jan can wrestle, and I wish he would wrestle more, because I actually think it would open up his hands, and I think it would open up opportunities for him. He's a guy he'll catch a kick and just sweep the leg, but even though he'll sweep the leg, he reminds me of a little kid wrestler who's just learning wrestling for the first time. When you teach wrestling, and show them a single, and they pick the leg up and they kick the leg out or something like that, and you have to like yell and like, no, cover him because you don't get any points. Like, that's what he does. He'll just kick the leg out. I'm like, why'd you do that? Like, you did all that just for nothing. Like, get the takedown and stop working. Excuse me. If he closes distance, he'll look for body lock takedowns. He can shoot. Like, he's got the skills, and he's great at winning scrambles. But in his losses, he's been taken down because I think when you're just abandoning the wrestling, it leaves you open to get taken down. And when you have that mindset to, I need to win wrestling exchanges too, and I need to go some offensive takedowns, he wouldn't be getting taken down by Nurmagomedov. He wouldn't be getting taken down by Aljamain Sterling. Now, Aljamain Sterling, he's such a different grappler than most people, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. Now, moving to Rob. Dude, this guy has the ultimate balls to the wall style. Like, constantly attacking. He's not scared of anybody. Like, even a legendary guy like Jose Aldo, he's still like going right at him. And was another fight? I'm trying to think of who was this recent guys. It was Jose Aldo. What was the other fight
from Rob?
Yeah,
Marlon Moraes, Cody Stamen.
Oh, maybe I think it was Stamen, where he was just like, that's another guy who's really good and just like was just throwing haymakers and just spinning attacks and just no fear of getting hit. He kind of throws punches just to force his opponent's back to bring up their hands, and then he's going to shoot through your hips and with insane pace. Great entries, chain wrestles together. Some of the best cardio. Like, we talk about best cardio in MMA, and I don't know if he has the best.
He's in the team photo.
Yeah, that's right. He's in the club.
Yeah.
So impressive, concerning that he has this pace, but he fights like a guy who should gas out 20 seconds into a fight, or 3 minutes into a fight, because all he does is throw haymakers, spinning attacks, and wrestle.
Yep.
And then his style of wrestling, he's not a take you down, hold you down, and that's the end of it. He actually needs to improve his top control. And a lot of times that happens, and I'm thinking this is just me pure guessing, being from Georgia. They don't do folk style wrestling; they do freestyle wrestling, and freestyle wrestling has very few moments on the ground. That's why I think folk style wrestling is the best wrestling. But so top control isn't as stressed as in just blasting through hips or throws and stuff like that is. So I said the betting lines should be closer, and this is a tough one because Merab has such a unique style. Like you can train with anybody you want, like nobody can mimic his style to that level. Plus, we've seen Jan get out wrestled in the past, and we've seen Ron feel to let his hands go. Like Merab's going to out-volume him. There's no doubt about that. But Jan is a sniper, and with all these big shots that Merab does, he leaves himself open to be countered. And I think Jan lands clean shots, especially as the fight goes on, 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round. If it was a 3-round fight, I feel much better about Merab's chances based on his crazy style and Jan giving away rounds. But I think he hurts Merab. I think he finds, when Rob does some crazy spinning attack and he's not, and Jan sidestepping it, then blasting a hook, I think he might even drop him, might even hurt him, might even stop him. I want to say he actually gets a late finish. So, I'm gonna say he gets a late finish. Give me Jan by 4th round TKO.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up all the points that kind of occurred to me as I thought about this fight, and several that probably didn't occur to me. But one thing that definitely stands out to me is that you mentioned Merab's weaponized pace, where it's not just that he never gets tired. It's that he never gets tired, even though he's doing things that normally are cardio killers, and his opponent does get tired. He's not one of those wrestlers that, he gets the takedowns, but he's actually getting more tired than the person he's wrestling. He's not one of those guys. But he is going into his first 5-round fight, and Jan is going into his 5th 5-round fight in the UFC, 7th overall. Like,
is it his 5th in a row too, isn't it?
Well, no, because last time against O'Malley was just a 3-round.
Oh, O'Malley was 3. Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, so it's his 5th in his last 6 fights. And they've gone into the championship rounds every time. So as incredible as Dvalishvili's cardio is, it's still something of an open question whether he can do that for 5 rounds.
Yeah.
Because if he can, the biggest threat he poses to Jan is if Jan doesn't visibly hurt him with punches, judges are just going to see Dvalishvili like outlanding him 2-1 maybe getting a takedown. And even if the takedown doesn't lead to much, they just see Merab like swarming all over Jan like a little Wolverine.
Yeah.
By the optics,
good way to describe it.
Yeah. Jan could find himself down rounds in the early going, but even there, again, because it's a 5-round fight, because Jan, not because of cardio, but just because of his vision gets sharper and becomes more and more of a sniper as the fight goes along. Even if Merab does his whirling dervish thing and say he wins the first 2 rounds, I'm still not too worried about Jan, because I think he will start to hurt Merab as they go along. And it's an open question whether Merab will be able to get the takedowns. Only, kind of pretty damn elite wrestlers have been able to do it on any sort of consistent basis. I love Merab's game. He's a blast to watch. I'm not sure why the UFC is. I don't know why the UFC has slow rolled him so hard, because for a fighter that goes to as many decisions as Merab does, he is a lot of fun to watch.
I think some of it has to do with, he's main training partner, best friend of Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah.
Who's in the champion division. And we didn't mention about stylistically how he matches against Petrino. He's got Aljamain Sterling, who's fought him for, 10 rounds or whatever.
Yeah, 9 rounds and change.
9 and change. Yeah.
Merab has been there when they brought in the Adrian Yanez's of the world to simulate Jan for Sterling's camps. Merab is right there in the rotation. He's going to be about as well prepared as you can be to fight Petr Yan without having done so. But I do think this is going to be a little too much of an ask, and it's going to be a damn shame if this is as close as Merab got to a title shot after everything he's done in the UFC. Like, we need to work him into the conversation of most accomplished fighters in UFC history that never won a title, or at least never made it to a title fight. Like, stick him in there in like the Jacare conversation.
If he wins, I mean, is he the number one contender?
If he wins, I think he's the number one contender, and I think we're looking at, after the Cejudo and Sterling fight, assuming that happens, Sterling maybe moves up, win or lose. What
if Cejudo wins? There's your little storyline, coming back in, avenging his teammates' loss,
and what an insane fight that would be.
But don't forget, you have Sean O'Malley. Say what you want. Dana White said the winner gets a title shot, and he did win.
Yep.
And he's obviously the most marketable of all those people.
Of course. Yeah. He's one of the most marketable people. He's the most marketable non-champ in the UFC.
Besides Conor.
Like, by non-champ, I mean like someone who's never been a champ. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Whoa. Oh, obviously you're counting Bo Nickal's world championship, U23 world championship.
Yes, of course. Yes. But yeah, I have Jan by decision here. If he gets a late KO, that will look incredible. I mean, to be, the first person to legitimately beat Merab in the UFC will actually be a big feather in Jan's cap. Like this, it's not like this is a lose-lose situation for him. No. That kind of cements him as, hey, I'm still here, and I'm going to keep knocking off your top contenders if you don't, let me back into the title picture. And if Merab beats Jan, if he beats him convincingly, I mean, yeah, he's going to be stuck in line, probably behind O'Malley, but he's right there. And again, just probably more deserving in absolute terms, but the marketing thing is going to have him on the outside looking in.
Yeah. One thing you said, you asked, is Jan a top 15 fighter and all his talent? He's got all the talent in the world. There's a lot of pressure on him coming to this fight, because if he loses this fight, that is already the deepest division, in my opinion. He's already got a long way back, being that you've lost twice to the champion. Again, one of them controversial, and the other one, but you had your second chance and you lost. And again, it was a very close fight. You could have won, but still, there's so many guys in that division. You can't have that. Now, go on. If Henry Cejudo wins the title, that changes what a stylistic matchup between Jan and Cejudo.
Even if Sterling wins and moves up, like that still leaves Jan a really happy guy.
Yeah, but if Sterling wins and decides not to move up, or he moves up for one fight with Volkanovski or something like that, and he loses, goes right back down, he goes back to defending his title, he's not going to fight. And Jan is not a guy that can move. He's not a big bantamweight.
No, he's not.
He couldn't make flyweight, but he's not a big bantamweight where he can go up to featherweight. Yep. And imagine Jan versus Max Holloway, the size difference.
Yeah, it'd be ridiculous.
I mean, I guess it's the same as Volkanovski, but
I mean,
Volkanovski's thick.
And Jan's not. Like even Sterling, Sterling is probably less than an inch taller than Jan, but he's got like huge shoulders and this V taper and big. He looks like a little mini Phil Davis.
Yeah, or John Jones.
Well, I think he's thicker than Jones. Like Davis has got like these wide shoulders, V taper, like Davis. Big legs. Yeah, like Sterling's got that physique.
Another thing, and I know we're kind of going off how we normally do the show, but you mentioned about the what do judges look for and how all this craziness from Rob looks bad. I also think the stand up, the way that Jan turtles and he hides, even if he's blocking these big haymakers, it just you've seen it a million times. When a guy throws a big shot and gets blocked, it just looks good. Mm-hmm. Even though I blocked everything,
just like any head kick scores points, even if it's completely blocked and it's at 25% speed, you might as well throw it.
Yeah,
that's right. So yeah, I've got Jan by decision in this one. I think, he'll kind of fight through the smoke and madness of Merab fight and be sniping on him by the late rounds. I wouldn't be surprised if you're right and there's a late stoppage, but I mean, not many people have really hurt Merab at all at this point. He's got a real solid chin on top of everything. So I'm going to pick it to go to decision, but that is it. That's the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 221, Jan versus Dvalishvili. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you the best combination of in-depth analysis and occasional wandering asides and story time as you'll find anywhere in the industry. Please do like, subscribe, leave us a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Keith and I both man the comment section, and we'd love to go back and forth with you. If you think we're crazy about any of these picks, you might be right. To quote Billy Joel, I guess. Anyway, let us know if you've got any big upset picks. Make your voice heard. But most importantly, join us for the recap. We are live on the SureDog YouTube page about 10 or 15 minutes after the main event, where Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll break down all 14 of these fights in reverse order, starting with that fantastic main event, going all the way down to the surprisingly interesting first couple of fights on the card. We will talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We will talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. But most importantly, the live chat is open that entire time. So we are taking your questions and your comments, your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to join them. Between now and then, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you once again for listening, and by all means, enjoy the fights.